should be live, and let's see how that goes.
Right. Wonderful. And I think I can pin the live to the top of the page as well.
Okay, great.
And I'm sorry if I'm not talking because now I'm looking.
Not a problem. Yes, we're in that wonderful moment. I've got. Well, hello out there watching. Thank you so much for showing up at the Women in Horror Film Festival, Hellbent for Horror takeover of the channel. And we wanted to have a special show today. We have quite a few folks, as you can see on here. The name of the show is Let Your Voice Be Heard. And I'm going to very quickly just mute something. And what was happening, Vanessa and I, people who watch the show probably have gotten the pattern that we tend to have. And because of everything that was going on in the world, specifically the riots and the murder and all of this terrible stuff that's just been coming to a head, we at first had this thing of perhaps we shouldn't do a show. And to me, that seemed like not the way to go, because we talk about horror all the time as being the thing that lets us get through so much. It lets us talk about things that sometimes we don't want to talk about, but it also doesn't mean that we have to talk about it all the time. And there seemed to be a very decent answer, which was, we don't have to talk really. We wanted to make sure that we have a platform. We talk about this as pirate radio all the time. We do the show, it's like pirate radio. We have people take over the airwaves, and we decided to just hand the airwaves over to people who needed to speak, who don't get that platform all the time. We wanted to get that the radio waves to be broader. And so we have our group of esteemed folk on here. And Vanessa, you want to say hi and then start having everybody introduce themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that Scott said is true. We went back and forth, and this is our small way to try to do some good and really amplify the signal a little bit and get talking, because I think this is a really important conversation to have. And we encourage people to join us. I will be watching the comments. If you have questions, if you just want to say something wonderful and beautiful, let us know. We'll get it shared. But I think it's a really important conversation to have. And all of these wonderful people that I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves were kind and gracious enough to lend their voices tonight. So let's see. I'm not sure what order you guys are seeing. Dawn, I think you're at the top. Okay. Maybe we'll start and go clockwise.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Don Guillory, or Donald R. Guillory, author, historian, co-host of the Necronomicon.com. And that's about it, I guess, for now.
Right. Dawn, thank you so much for being on. I had a great time being on your show, Necronomicon.
Oh, we loved having you on.
Wonderful. Who's next? I'm sorry. I'm looking at two things. I apologize if this gets a little clunky. I will do my best, but this is not quite where I shine.
Well, I did want to point out that you said that Don was like in the bottom corner, but he's in a different position for me. So when you're saying go clockwise, yeah, I'm like, I don't know who's next.
Okay, good to know. We are all viewing things differently.
Yeah, because I have Tiffany right here.
According to Comika on mine.
Ryan's right there for me.
Okay, well, we'll go. Let's see. Waylon, I've got you here, and then I can kind of go across.
Yeah. You're gonna have to pick people.
I'm just gonna
like
pick
magic
people.
mirror. I see Tammy. I see Joey.
Yes.
I'm Waylon Jordan. I am an author and founder of iHorror's Horror Pride Month.
Wonderful. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tiffany, you are next.
Oh yeah. I'm Tiffany Warren. I am a filmmaker out of Dallas, Texas, and I have I guess my namesake is Stupid Idea Films.
Wonderful, thank you. Comika, you're next.
I'm Comika Hartford. I'm an independent screenwriter. Right now, I'm involved with Celia C. Peters' wonderful, amazing, creepy podcast, Domesticated. I have some of my own projects like The Gray Area, Hinterland Zoo. It's all creepy shit. So there you go.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Brian.
Hi, I am Brian Ashton Smith. I'm a filmmaker based in Atlanta. I primarily act, but I'm also doing a lot of writing and directing as well. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us tonight and doing this. I'll again, you know, Scott and I kind of mentioned this is usually just us jabbering on all night about horror and the stuff we love, but the goal of tonight is really to kind of hand over the platform to you guys. You know, as a country, we're going through a lot right now, and I think everybody is experiencing a lot of hurt and anger, rage, you name it, all of the feelings. So I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and see how everybody's doing, and let you guys just talk. And if anyone wants to jump in and steal the mic.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going first.
Going first.
You don't want to go first.
Sacrificial lamb.
I can at least set something up. Okay.
I am all in my feels. I am not going first.
So, do you know what occurred to me, guys? Because we're all lovers of that which is horror, that literally we are living out the film of Poltergeist, where America is the family in the house, and we have like the bodies under the house, and they're starting to come up, and we're all like, "Wow, we just moved in!" Like, wow, we are all Joe Beth Williams now. Like, what is even happening in my kitchen?
That is a great analogy.
Yeah.
Great analogy.
Yeah, and every time you think you've seen all of the dead bodies that are rising up,
Nope.
there's like so many more, and it's every day something new.
It feels like as a country we've gotten really good at hiding bodies and not actually dealing with them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can only do that for so long, I suppose.
Yeah, it's funny because I was in a conversation yesterday with some people, and they're in New Zealand. They moved from America to New Zealand, and they were talking about what they had just read in some articles, and saying, you know, this is Rome in its last gasps, and get ready because we're going to be the last to know when the infrastructure falls. These people are just going to disappear, and we're going to be like, how come there's no health care anymore? It's just going to be like overnight. And that what I said at that point was, we're living George Romero's zombie apocalypse. We've been preparing in zombie apocalypse world for the longest time. And here we are. It doesn't look like we thought it was going to look, but it's the same idea that there was in the first movie, that George Romero always said there's two things that his zombie movies were about. Ignoring the problem was what all the movies after the first one were about. And the first one was about the new eating the old, the revolution that eats the old. So it's interesting. I really felt it very much yesterday, and even today. I think I mentioned before we got on that I was feeling a sense of dread, and I think most of us are. And even though it may seem like maybe we're turning a corner, maybe something's happening with justice, I'm actually more depressed. I'm scared because I have that shoe drop feel.
Well, I also think you have the feeling of, you know how when you want to buy a house and you want to see what's under that carpeting, and you lift up one and it's just a nightmare, and you kind of are like, did we put the down payment on this? Because I want to look under the rest of these fucking carpets. Because as you said, we're like, all right, we're getting the officers in the most recent murder charged, but Breonna Taylor's murder is still free. Amber Bland's murder is still free. Pamela Turner's murder is still free. Corinne Gaines's murder is still free. Deborah Danner's murder is still free. And it's like, at what point is any of this going to get answered? So I think that that's the feeling you're having, is the feeling we're all having of like, yeah, that's cool, but what about the rest of the murder? And that's a terrifying thing to say. It's like, wow, what about the rest of the murder?
And the fact that so many of their murderers aren't ever going to be brought to justice because they were already tried, or they were already, you know, it's like, it is what it is. You know, they're
back at work.
Yeah. Yeah, back at work all over again as if it never happened.
Business as usual. Sadly, is business as usual.
So that's, I think, why we all have that feeling of agita and fear, is that we see that we're dealing with the part we can see, and we can smell. Yeah, we can smell the rotten body. It's like, oh, you have found that finger. I smell a fucking graveyard of rotten bodies, but that's good. We found that finger.
Right.
It's gonna get a lot creepier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's been really, really weird? Like, at first, I've been going like through this whole weird thing of not just emotions, but like thoughts and perspectives. Because I'm biracial, and I literally still have different struggles with my racial identity. And so it's been like this whole weird thing. So it's like half of the time it's like, okay, I'm ally, but wait, where am I? You know, and then adding the extra layer of colorism, it's like, well, even still, so it's just been this thing. And at first I was pumped, and I had full steam. I was doing everything that I thought I could. I was doing what I thought that was right and stuff. And then I had a couple of incidences where I finally started experiencing a lot of things that I'd read about and that people had warned me about and told me about. And I was like, oh. And it was I found a new level of rage, and I just wanted to like start calling out all of these racists and calling out all of this fucked up shit and just like screaming it out. And then I thought about it, and I'm like, well, they're all there. They've always been there. And if I go trying to find them out, seek them out, it's like, how? And a lot of my white friends, people have known me for years, are all of a sudden coming to me and asking me what they should be doing or how they should be handling this. I'm like, I don't even know. I'm fucking learning some new things myself, like, because I'm brown. And then the kicker, the most infuriating thing, some people I've known, we've had conversations. We've been following each other on Facebook. Some of them we've been face to face for at least almost 10 years. Some of them didn't realize I was biracial. That same person didn't even realize that I was more closely involved, or not. I related closer to my Mexican heritage than my Black heritage, and so I'm like lost in a lot of this. And they're like, "Oh, we thought you were Black." I'm like,
We are Black, yeah.
but like it was weird, just the how they were trying to approach me with it. Like I knew, like I had this knowledge that they don't, that I could help them with. I'm like, I don't know. Why are you asking me this? Go Google, watch some stuff. There's like a million other people on your news feed, I'm sure, that are sharing things, even personal experiences, that are talking about things that you can learn from, but you came to ask me. I don't know what to tell you,
Well, I know,
ask.
And it's an unfortunate thing, but it's very true that unfortunately in the US, white culture has been formed around the idea that Black people and people of color are there to educate you if you mess up, that we are there for free labor because that's what the country was built on. So if you don't understand something, it isn't your fault. It's because Black people didn't teach you, which is amazing in a time when everyone is walking around with a computer in their pocket. You shouldn't need your Black friends to explain racism in the country you were born in. That's only 200 odd years old. Like, these are things that Americans, as people that are sentient, they're autonomous, you should be looking up as white people. There's organizations like the White Nonsense Roundup. They can help you a little bit, but asking Black people and people of color to do emotional labor and physical labor
for you,
words for you, looking up, explaining this to you, and they don't want to pay you. The reason they think that's okay is because this nation is based on people of color, especially Black people, doing labor for free. And they don't realize what they're invoking. They're like, I'm not racist. Here, do this homework for me.
Right.
That just stops. So
it's weird. It's
the White Nonsense Roundup. Send them to Google. Let them remind them they have a computer in their pocket and they're fine. they're okay.
And Brian, I know that it was mentioned before about that you can go to people's pages and hear their experiences, see their experiences. You have you did a video post that was very strong, and I'd like to talk to that a little bit and have you actually talk about it if you're interested in discussing that conversation that you put on video on your page. If not, whatever you'd like to talk about.
It's fine. I did it for the conversation, so by all means, it's fine. I essentially just went into I made a bit of a confession on Facebook, telling people of an experience that I had back in 2008, where I was arrested for asking a police officer what his badge number was. It was unjust right then and there. I had a lawsuit pending with the city of Baltimore for a while. This was right the day of President Obama's inauguration. And yeah, the idea that I spent the night in jail all while I was trying to like de-escalate a situation. Most people who know me know that I'm one of the most peaceful people that, you know, I'm not a violent person at all. Like the only reason to be afraid of me is something that would have to do with you. So I think a lot of people in my whole life, I've been told this, like, oh, well, you know, you're an exception. You're not one. Yes, you get it. I got it in my entire life. It's just,
Oh my God.
you know, you see what I think a lot of people form their opinion of Black America based off of what they see on television.
Right.
Yeah.
If they don't have people in their lives, directly in their lives, giving them anything else, all they see is on television. And unfortunately, very negative imaging for the last however long we've been on television. I think things are starting to change now, but I mean, it's been a long history of just criminality. I think America has always just equated Blackness with criminality and poverty. And like, you know, you talk to any politician and you talk about Black issues, that's immediately where they go. And you have to ask yourself why. At some point, like, I'm not a criminal and I'm not in poverty. So like, what are you saying to me? But I don't know. The reason why I wanted to post that was essentially just that people needed to know that I'm not an exception. Like your good Black friend has also had these experiences. So if it can happen to me, you know that it can happen to all of us, and it is happening to all of us. So essentially, I wanted to create a space where we could like come together and find answers and talk about it honestly. I think when it comes to racism, a lot of people are afraid to talk about it, especially because they get so defensive. They think it's a personal attack on them.
Yeah.
If the idea that racism feels just like a personal judgment and it's just black or white. If you're racist, you're bad. You're a bad person and that's it. And people are a lot more complex than that. Mm-hmm. So the idea that racism is just focused on the tokens of wearing a Klan hat or burning a cross or saying the N-word, like it's not just those tokens. It's the innate fear that you have of people for no reason. Mm-hmm. It is the woman who called in Central Park recently, called the cops and then put on those fake tears to weaponize his skin against him. Yeah. It's so much more than just the tokens. You know, oh, I don't say the N-word and I'm not a Klans member, so I'm not racist. Mm-hmm. I think one of the best things that I've seen about what's happening right now is there's this book by Ibram X. I forgot his last name, but it's
Andy.
Yes, thank you. Yes, it is How to Be an Anti-Racist, and I love that term, and I see it it's going around like crazy right now because it's not enough to just not be racist. To break down the systems of systemic racism that we have in this country, you have to actively fight it. It is a lot more active than just not being racist yourself. You have to be an anti-racist. When you see it around you, you have to fight it. You can't just let it go because it's not you. It's not your problem. It is an American problem. All right, off my high horse.
You mentioned something about the conversation. I think it's really important to look at, what it takes sometimes to speak, because I saw this post that really spoke to me, which was somebody saying, I'm worried, I get upset that my white friends who are obviously trying their best to be good allies are afraid to say the wrong thing. And it's like, guess what? Say the wrong thing. More important to have the conversation. You say the wrong thing, we'll tell you, learn, and then we move the conversation forward. And I think that's something that needs to be said. That
Absolutely.
I needed, even though I get it unconsciously, seeing it mattered. And it was like, yes, because things are so heated right now. It's just I think that's part of, we all have levels that we don't like arguments. You don't want to hear the loud table at the restaurant. And so
sucks, man.
Yeah.
Sucks.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy to just instead kind of, curl up. So hearing you have the permission to sensibly make mistakes, time to make mistakes. But, at the same time, having it where you don't have to be quiet because it seems as if that's the better way to go. I think.
And I think some of it is acknowledging those mistakes. If you continue to make them, if you continue to say the wrong things, even if you're being called out, but you don't want to admit to it because you can't admit to yourself, these are the things you're saying, this is who you are. There's no growth there. And, I think people get very nervous, if I make this mistake, if I say this wrong, now I'm going to be the one who's targeted for this. But at the same time, I think being silent is almost worse. This is how we grow. It is with these conversations. It's with having these open discussions, in a very productive manner.
When it comes down to it, when you know better, you do better. So if you don't know to ask the questions, or if you're so afraid to have the conversation that you just remain quiet, you don't know what to say, you'll never know what to say because you just stayed quiet.
Right.
Say it. I'll tell you if you're wrong. Yeah. we can have an honest conversation.
You can do a Google search. You can literally stuff your nerves about talking about as a white person. Look it up. Look it up first. Just do a little bit of your own effort before
massive smart computers and all of our pockets.
It should be all of your effort. It goes back to what you said earlier, Comika, and that reliance on others to educate you. Like, you've got to be, your own advocate for anything. You can't be relying to say, well, I don't know what to do, to tell me the right words to say.
Yeah,
we're grown-ups, and like you said, we've been here since birth, living in this country. If we don't know how to do it, there's bigger problems.
People have been given so much false information that they've never challenged. A recent discussion I had was someone brought up Black on Black crime, and of course, being from a family of lawyers and historians, I had to break out the truth to them that Black people don't assault each other at any higher rate than any other race. In fact, white people do it at a 0.04% more than we do. So this concept that we are more violent, which goes to what Brian was saying, like, what's with the fear? It's just not real. And unfortunately, and white people hate hearing this, white people are more likely to be serial killers, to be school shooters, to be live shooters, and get this, to violently attack each other and police. More likely by far. Get this, I had someone try to argue with me. So she went to go look it up and use the computer in her pocket. Was the worst day she ever had. She was like, oh no, I didn't.
To disprove you. My worldview's changed. Yeah.
Right.
And you know what though?
Like if you're using terms like Black on Black crime, you are playing into a racist narrative that rained on you. It isn't your fault. Look it up. You will see everything I just said is true.
But to add to that, the funny thing about the black on black crime, a lot of them are probably also thinking about gangs and drugs.
But even with those numbers, we're still underneath every other
Right.
race, which is
Right.
amazing when you think about what we've been through and what we've fought, and we're still less violent than everyone else. So the idea that we're more violent, wow. Just
the arguments that most people give are going to be the conviction rates, but that comes down to policing a lot more than it does the actual activities of these communities.
Right.
There you go.
But even then, going back to the whole thing of drugs and gang violence, both particular problems came as a result of systemic racism. Like the gangs that formed were protecting themselves from the police. The drugs that were there were brought in by our own government, and there are documents that support that have been released. They're the official government documents on these plans. So even then, even if they wanted to ignore numbers, it's like those two things exist because of systemic racism.
Yeah.
You can literally watch one documentary. You can watch one documentary and find that out. And it's like,
And it's on your phone. One documentary. You don't have to bother us with your damn questions.
Take 2 hours out of your life, watch something, sit back on the couch. Like,
Read a book.
That's too much. That's asking way too much for a lot of people. Have you seen the typos that they use when they fight back at people? That's asking a lot of them. Pictures, moving pictures, blinking lights. It's just easy enough.
Something they can do passively on the couch.
Yes.
Right. I just want to very quickly say something to the folks that are out there. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We have Jonathan Williams, Rick Serra, Elise Salomon, Lisa Gorski, Christine Ramirez, a whole bunch of people. Chloe Carroll, Dakini Umatama is here. Brian Dickinson, Ian Crothers, Avishal Weinberger. Thanks so much for being here. Jennifer Trudrung, Corey Mack, Melissa Cunup, yay, and Amanda Stone as well. So we have quite a few people who have come in.
She's right behind you.
I know
Right
that
over there.
I know that there's a lot of people who have been trying to get in the room, and we haven't been able to bring you in. One of the things that I had mentioned in the thing, and I just want to say it out loud so that it's heard. Please put your question in the comments in the Facebook page so that we know who you are, what your question is, because we have 7 people in here now and I'm just barely hanging on there, folks. Trying to keep everything from falling apart. So it's going to be a little bit tougher to get everybody on. We have someone from Argentina. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Amazing. Well, hello, Argentina.
But we're more
and
than
just
happy to have
to
you.
piggyback on that a little bit, because the comment thread tends to move a little bit quickly. If we miss a question, copy and paste and get it down to the bottom. Again, I'm not trying to skip anybody. I just, sometimes it moves a little bit faster and then the conversation goes, and I'm doing my best, I promise.
And I just don't know all the names. We're lucky that we have new names on here, fresh names. So it's really
Love
hard.
new names.
Yeah.
Love new people. This is good.
Yeah. One thing that was mentioned before was the idea of learning from the mistakes. And I was going to say, Waylon, one of the things that I've been going through and I need to just learn on everything is as society is changing, mores are changing, people are able to express themselves more. It was being able to come up with the right way to use the right pronoun with people and having to make that mistake several times because I'm ancient and I just continue to, there are things like saying sir, which is something that I learned from the military. And I can talk to someone who identifies with she, and I'll mistakenly at the end of a sentence just say, "Sir, you're correct, sir." And it's like, no. And it's like, okay, cool. As long as you're, allowing me, that to connect and, change my direction on this, I think it's fine. I think, I'm hoping that I can handle it right. And from what I get from folks is that it depends on how I respond, how they're going to respond.
Well, and that's exactly what they're saying also. When you make a mistake and someone corrects you, then take the correction. Don't take it as anything personal. They're not trying to come down on you. They're just trying to educate you. And I think that's what, we deal with that a lot in the LGBTQ community as well. There's a lot of education that goes on with those who aren't a part of the community. But yeah, when we do take that moment to give you a little bit of the education that you're asking people for, then take the education when it happens.
Actually, to add on that, when you do get the education, listen.
Oh yeah.
There was literally a woman who was like, what do I do? How do I go? Like, what am I supposed to do? And that was before I lost the energy and the will. And so I gave her some examples. I was talking to her. She literally kept ignoring me. But her white friends that were like, yeah, like, I think we should have make a person of color friend of the month day. Like, that's an event that we should have. And I'm like, did this motherfucker just call us Pokemon? Is that what just happened? And she heart reacted
like a Jelly of the Month club.
She heart reacted to comment, but would not engage me when I'm sitting here explaining. And she's like, you all need to not be offensive. Like, don't be hurt. Like, we're not trying to be offensive. I'm like, let me tell you about that.
You are. I mean,
Terrible.
Yeah.
It's funny because she's still on my friends list. I've not deleted her. I know that she's not going to delete me because she knows what she's going to look like if she does. So I keep tagging her and shit so she can learn. She wants to learn.
Maybe, the positive of that, maybe she'll tune in and maybe she'll listen.
Or she won't.
Unless
a white person, no fucking joke, unless a white person will talk to her, then she'll listen. But it was literally me and 2 other POCs on that thread, we were giving her links, we were explaining things at length, didn't engage either one of us, but kept talking to all the other white people on the thread. And I'm just
fortunate to have a lot of white friends who are allies who get it. So if they need to hear it from someone else.
Right.
You know what? I'll tag her on your video. I'll tag her on your video. We'll see what happens.
Do all the tags.
Cool.
Yes.
That's what that was.
We messed up. Like, I can say that I definitely messed up just in misgendering someone. It wasn't on purpose. It was that sometimes if your perception of someone's gender is just not correct, you can have it in your mind that they are he or they are she or they are they. It doesn't mean you're right. And then when you interact with them, you just got told he, and you're like, and she, and you see it fall out. You see it like you just knocked into a wedding cake, and it's at the reception.
Trying to catch the word coming out of your mouth, but it's too late.
That's gonna happen. Like, just step back, apologize again, try to step back, correct yourself. If you realize, like I did, because I would just kept falling into the cake like it was just horrible. And I'm just like, just get it together. It's that my perception didn't catch up with the real information from the person, and my brain was doing that. I just apologized. I backed up, and I was, I got in touch with them later. Like, was that okay? They were like, no, I was laughing at you. You were just, like, you embarrass yourself when you misgender someone. So acknowledge you are the one who was embarrassed. You realize that you have made the mistake. You are not here to tell anyone who they are. And you're just flailing around like a ridiculous human, because that's part of what we all are. People tend to listen to that because they see that you are wrong. You are backing up. And sorry.
Yeah.
I think there's a really powerful lesson in that, though, just the ability to admit that you are wrong. We don't see that nowadays. Definitely not from any of the higher ups in our country at the moment. Like, you are not allowed to be wrong. And as Americans, we often don't give each other the grace to be wrong or the space to be wrong. So, like, if we could all just give ourselves just a little bit of space to be like, all right, I may not be right here, but I'm going to say this and let me know if I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. I am wrong. And we could go a long way.
Yeah. 100% agree. I mean, it's not like we have all the knowledge all the time. yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to be able to admit those things, and also on the other side of it, kind of listen and hear. I mean, if someone makes a mistake, if you can receive that with kindness, it's when those mistakes continue to get repeated and you realize you're not listening. Like, now I've told you 5 times, and now I just feel like you're doing it on purpose.
Or it's not a mistake, and what they're doing is, oh, but I'm just looking for information. I'm just like, no, you're.
I read your intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you can get that. Like, you can feel that.
Right. Or the dismissiveness. There's a level of dismissiveness to the issue, which I think is huge. I have many friends that have issues like they've changed their names because they changed their religion. They wish to change their names, and their parents or family members like, that ain't happening. You're still this person.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then it's like, I'm sorry that it offends you. And then, so it's like, you're saying all of this stuff about how you love your kid and everything. And then you're like, no, you're a rental unit that we're renting right now. And, and it just, it happens a lot. And I think, the idea of when I'm wrong, it stings. Right. And I've made some mistakes that have stung, but, get back up, wipe my nose, and just continue on, and try not to make the same errors. But the intention, I think, is important, because there is this thing of not wishing to say that you're wrong. What I hear in corporate world, when I was in the corporate world, I would have a boss that would sit there and say, we don't have a problem with mistakes. You make a mistake, that's great. But if you do it like 3 times, that's a pattern. We have a problem with patterns. And so in many areas of our culture, we have no problems whatsoever understanding the difference between an honest mistake and a pattern that needs changing.
However, because when you're thinking about issues having to do with race, gender, sexuality, there's a lot of trauma in all of that. So one of the biggest things that white people and non-Black POC tend to say when someone gets angry with them for either a mistake, for a mistake, because it happens, or with gender identity, sometimes they get mad and they're gonna react that way, and it's, I tend to tell them, I'm sorry, but you have to understand that they have a lot of trauma behind that. Right. And a lot of the times, especially angry white people, well, I didn't do anything to them, so I don't understand why I have to cave. Why can't they meet me halfway? And I'm like, think about you. I'm sure they have trauma. I'm sure they have their own trauma, their own experiences. I have a lot of white friends that have stories from when they were in predominantly minority neighborhoods. I don't think any of us are ever saying you don't have any trauma or you haven't experienced your own experiences, but you have to think about the length of time and the amount of trauma that person has attached to what they've been through. And that's where I think it's problematic, because we have this, healthier thinking people have this idea of we should meet each other halfway, but that's not always going to happen, because there are people that are they have so much trauma and hurt that it doesn't matter how the other person's intention may come across, they're always going to think that person's trying to attack me.
Well, and also when you run into that situation and you get angry when someone says something like that, what they don't realize is they may be the 15th people who have said something that day, who have misgendered a person or who have used their own prejudices against this person. And it's been happening all day long. And you're the lucky one, because you were the one who just sent that truck right over the edge of the cliff. I mean, you not only does it the trauma that's built up over the years, but it builds up within a day, and one day may not be as good as the next day. So I totally get what you're saying there. We see that a lot. I had a friend who's trans, and she had been having a bad day, and she happened to go to a local spot to get some food, and the entire time she was there, everyone who was there called her sir. And she left, and another friend who didn't mean anything, just slipped up because they were newly out. It was something new. They said the wrong thing, and that you cannot imagine the explosion that we saw that day. But it's just, you know, it's one day to the next, and you never know. You absolutely never know.
It's interesting because that day for that person, in a lot of ways, is paralleling what's happening in our country right now. A lot of people are like, we get that George Floyd, this was everyone who like almost universally has said like, this is one that shouldn't have happened. It was wrong. We all saw it, but they're thinking, they're not seeing the pattern. They're missing the forest for the trees. So yes, that's why this whole thing is a powder keg right now that is exploding, because it's not just George Floyd. It's been happening for 400 years, and we just recently started being able to document it. So I see so many posts of people who, and I am not anti-police whatsoever. I am anti the extreme militarization of the police, but I'm not anti-police. And I see these posts of people saying, you know, like, these are all the police officers who have been hurt and all. And I'm like, yes, I condemn that. That's terrible. These officers shouldn't have been shot at. These officers should not have been hurt. But you're responding to the cause. You're responding to the effect without acknowledging the cause. You have to handle the cause of the problem in order for the effects to stop.
That seems to be, for some strange reason, across the board with anything and everything, that seems to be a common thing. Instead of doing real problem solving and getting to the root cause and actually trying to fix it, we slap band-aids on it. And it's like, I learned that through when I was a supervisor at Amazon, watching how they would look at how they would fix problems. And I'm like, you realize the amount of money you're throwing into that temporary problem, trying to get it fixed quick? If we spent the big amount of money one time around, get the actual fix, and we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. But it seems like that's just the thing. It's like for every single thing, it's a quick fix. And it's like, I'm constantly butting heads with people because I'm like, if we just take time to fix the real thing, this won't happen again. I promise. And nobody fucking listens. I'm like, that's fine.
Well, and that's what
like,
so many people are pushing for
soon.
right now. Yeah. I mean, they're just pushing for the quick fix right now. Oh, we're going to arrest these 4 guys, and it's just going to take care of everything. And people have finally stood up and said, no, it's not going to take care of everything.
Mm-hmm. People are like, oh, they should stop protesting now. Why are they still protesting? I'm like, this shit's still broken?
I just want us to come back around to our poltergeist metaphor. They stop the bodies! Stop the
bodies! Since you brought up poltergeist, we did have a question in the room here, and it was about horror, and it was a while ago, so I apologize. I won't have the person's name, and I'm going to paraphrase. But basically what they were saying is, with all of the horrors that are happening in real life in real time as of right now, what do you think that horror as an art form can help us with or give us at times like this? Does anybody have
so much. I think that the very things that we're all afraid of, that are things that are giving us anxiety, all of these are things that can not only be examined in the genre, but we find that as human beings, we are strongest when we not only tell the stories of our fear, but we're able to look into the cave of our humanity, smell the breath of our fear, and conquer it. I think all of these stories, everything that we've talked about in this entire meeting, like, could literally be another fucking horror movie. I think that the genre is just going to be so helpful in unpacking this and uncovering this. I look to horror now more than any other time, and that doesn't mean that I'm not taking time out to watch Invader Zim because it makes me happy. People. I'm not sure. I just let everyone know that. But I do think that our genre it's going to be what saves us. It's going to be what gives us a voice. We all love horror comedy. I think that's going to be tearing apart a lot of this shit. I can't wait just to see those projects and screenplays and short films, and just, yes, I am here for it. Here for it.
That's awesome. I know. Oh my goodness, it just went away. So speak amongst yourselves. I had a point to make. It's in there somewhere. Who knows?
Well,
Blew
one
away.
post that I've seen that's come up a couple of times was, just talking about the trauma of current issues or related to current issues, was we can't necessarily process the whole George Floyd thing because we're still processing Emmett Till. And just by talking about how long this is and how, even just last year, or the year before, how the accuser came forward, had a deathbed confession and said, hey, I made all this stuff up.
Yeah.
Which is, great for us to find out 60 plus years after you do this. But when those wounds are still fresh, because when you hear her or read her story about how she made this false accusation, her husband and her brother-in-law went to go kill this child in the middle of the night, you think about everything that hasn't been achieved since then. Everything, all the, and even with Ahmaud Arbery, where, this guy's out for a jog and these three guys feel like, oh, well, let's go after him. They hit him with the car and then they shoot him. The video, or at least the lawyer convincing his client to release the video or leak the video for someone to finally get at least attention to this. And the frustrating thing with a lot of things, and even when we're talking about George Floyd, we have to have video.
You have to.
It's not enough that this stuff takes place. There are people who see it. There are people who are conducting it. People who are covering it up. But the general public has to see the video. And my first exposure to this with the Rodney King attack.
Yeah.
And just seeing that, I remember people were, obviously very upset and still upset about it, where when they saw the video, the reaction was within the Black and brown community was, finally, we got the cops on tape doing this shit.
Yeah.
And the first inclination we all had was, man, these cops are going to jail. But in the back of your head, like, they ain't going to jail. It's not going to happen. And, I forgot who brought up the Band-Aid issue earlier, but that's always the approach. You get to a certain tipping point, you have urban rebellions, riots taking place, and then you have someone coming in and saying, this is what we'll do to fix it. Might fix some things, might not. In the case of LA in 92, brought in all these developers, politicians saying that we're going to bring in jobs programs, we're going to bring in manufacturing, we're going to have after-school programs, we're going to have childcare, healthcare, we're going to have all this other stuff. And as soon as the cameras were gone, they got the fuck out of there.
Yeah, that was man, when that happened, comic relief was happening, which was this I don't know if anybody remembers Comic Relief, but it was a festival. So they were like, should we have this or not? The riots had just happened and they decided, yes, let's have it. And I remember Whoopi Goldberg coming out and saying the nation had a nervous breakdown. It was like, man, it was such like this relief of hearing somebody say that, and you think things are going to change and they don't. And that's kind of falls into the thing of talking about art, how it can do so much for us, but also how horror can sometimes be prescient. So somebody had mentioned before the entire Central Park thing with the dog and the woman crying crocodile tears and stuff. She's found out later to be a liberal, right? And so there's this whole thing that I think makes Jordan Peele's Get Out so great, is that it has this whole new look at what a racist looks like and what oppression looks like. This is the time when you see a bunch of people who are kind of liberal that are saying all of this stuff that they're trying to help. And basically you just have all voice taken away. We're so used to, when I watched it, I'm sitting there watching people get very uncomfortable when we see who the bad guys are, right? And as that movie continues, it makes you kind of sink into the seat because it's about taking away, at least my interpretation is that the idea of the sunken place is, even your allies are telling you to shut up. They're not allowing you to speak anymore. And so that really hit me. And it was something that I think that horror movie was on point to wake me up on things that I may not have noticed, or that I was used to genre tropes. And this was a new look at something for people who sometimes just, it's easier to just go down the path of the traditional bad guy. And it was really something to see for someone like myself. I was like, wow, this is great. Maybe we're getting somewhere on this, but well, here we are.
I think it's interesting you say it was like a new face of racism.
Right, right.
But
It's
to me,
not.
it wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
I think if you ask a lot of Black people, I don't think that surprised us. The fact that like racism isn't just like a down south or like like a Republican Party thing. Like I see it was the micro racisms that I think that's all the little microaggressions that happen in racism that I think Get Out captured so powerfully. It wasn't it racism through flattery, if that's a way. Like I've experienced it so much.
So often. I have to say that some of the most difficult and upsetting conversations with racists that I've had have been liberal racists. Liberal racists are always the ones that, like, if my hair's curling, they'll just reach out and start touching it.
I love how curly.
How racism is over, how people like me need to reach out to the skinheads to inform them. And when I tell them that's unsafe, they tell me I can't let fear run my life. And I'm like, no, that's your job. That's your job to reach out to your skinhead relatives. They want to murder us, okay? I'm not.
There's a good reason I don't know many skinheads.
Yeah.
You know more than I do.
Out in the way of their dangerous relatives. Like, oh no, I don't want to deal with my uncle who's in the Klan. You're supposed to come understand him and fix him for me. Again, what I was talking about before, we are always supposed to be willing to do this free labor of education. And they even want it for people that are dangerous. And I've literally had white liberals tell me I was racist because I wasn't caring enough about the skinheads.
You know,
not kidding.
I've noticed.
Not kidding.
I've noticed that there's a certain type of racist, because I'm starting to see it, like there's this whole scale, you know, because you have biases, you have prejudice, and then you have like we're saying, like with the Klan hat, and then like you're describing with the microaggressions. I've seen this thing where it's like if you call some of them out as racist, they turn around and call you racist for thinking they're racist. I'm like, what the fuck kind of logic is that? Like, this seems to be it's a new thing for me. I've never seen it before. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? I don't understand.
It is too many Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny cartoons where they sit there. You're the racist.
Right.
Duck season. Rabbit season. Duck season. Rabbit season.
Right.
Oh God, that feels sadly
racism
topical.
season, reverse racism season.
Feels very topical. I think that's something that I've kind of noticed in battles that I've had, because, you know, my background, full disclosure, I used to be in the Air Force. I was a firefighter. I've had a whole bunch of different lives, and I have a lot of friends still from those old days that, you know, they're slowly starting to disappear like drying dead leaves because of where I am. But at the same point, I get into these conversations where generalizations allow for this kind of crazy reverse racism stuff, like the idea of all lives matter, you know, where it's this generalization to sterilize something. And it's just like, even early on, I got that wasn't right.
I'm going to say this. That is definitely a trigger, so to speak, with me. Like at this point, if as soon as I hear somebody say, I want to hit them. They absolutely want to hit them, because I feel that there has been so much exposure explaining the difference between, you know, and why and how and what Black Lives Matter stands for. So it's like at this point, I'm like, get out of my face. I can't.
Yeah, it's intentional now. That you just never chose to get it. Like.
Mm-mm.
It almost feels like a spoiled child who wants everything and will not share and won't let go and is still trying to take more. You know, you say Black Lives Matter, and then someone goes, all lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand. I mean, it pisses me off too. And again, like I even think now, like I've seen so many really beautiful explanations and analogies put out to help people who don't understand, and they've been so clear. And still, I just don't think they want to understand.
No.
Yeah, it's
Bingo.
not accidental anymore, because the all lives matter was only ever said in response to Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Mhm.
It was never
Right.
said before. No one was like, hey, yeah, all lives matter. It's like the moment someone says, hey, Black Lives Matter, they're like, wait a minute. All lives. Like, whoa. It was only ever said as a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter.
Right.
So understanding that, it's there's no way that it's not intentional at this point.
Yeah, because I swear Hallmark or somebody is just churning out all these different little explanations and parables to tell you the difference between. I mean, every time I turn around, there's another explanation, and I'm like, oh, maybe they'll get it off this one. No, they're not going to get it off this one, but Hallmark just keeps churning them out, so maybe one of them will work.
If you find that Hallmark card, send it to me. Like, I want to see
some people I can mail it to.
frame it.
And going back to what Comika was talking about, wanting people to come and talk to their families for them or whatever, their creepy Uncle Joe or whatever. I'm sorry. I mean, I am a gay man born and raised in deep East Texas. Every time I drive up to a family reunion, every vehicle except mine has a Confederate flag on it somewhere, a bumper sticker, or and there comes a point in your life where you're afraid to go to your own families. You're afraid to be around your own family because, I mean, you don't know when you're going to be the victim of your own family.
Yeah.
You don't know when they're finally going to have enough of you running your mouth on Facebook or whatever and just wait for you to show up to the next family reunion so they can do something about you.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I kind of have a family full of the creepy Uncle Joes that you're talking about. And at some point I finally had to, just draw the line and say, no, I'm not going, and sometimes we have to make those hard decisions. Sometimes you can't educate Uncle Joe, no matter how much and no matter what you say.
Yeah.
And if it's really that big of a problem for you, then you'll learn and figure out a way to just cut the tie.
I think kind of speaking to that, the bigger picture of that is it's almost like this country has become the family with the stickers, and you're having to draw that line in the sand. I feel like there's that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
You've got all of these people, and it's finally to just say, no, like enough's enough. I'm not coming to the reunion anymore.
Yeah.
And be treated this way.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
While we have a moment of pause, I'm just going to be completely transparent. I'm really bad at segues.
On to the next topic.
I am. It's fine.
Segue.
So I'm going to segue only because being in the business that we are and being creatives, we actually had a question from a writer, and I wanted to just read her comment. Her name is Jennifer Trudrung. A lot of you may know her. She said, I'm in the midst of writing a horror screenplay set in the Deep South and loosely based on my childhood family history experience. This is my first time writing and addressing the racism I witnessed, and I'm struggling with the notion of writing about it as a white author and writing diverse characters. I will do my research and study more about the history and timeline of the characters beyond my experience, but I would love any advice about how to approach this. Thank you. I feel it's an important story to tell, but I want to do it justice.
All right. If I can take this one, and I'm gonna shit on an American classic as I do it.
Go for it.
Don't write it like well, I'm sorry, two books. One's a classic and one is I guess an attempt to become one. Them like To Kill a Mockingbird or The Help. However you do, as far as speaking about the Black characters in that way. Be truthful to the time period. The story. Be truthful to the time period, but be respectful of the people that are there, so you don't fall into those same tropes and same minimizing of who those people are and who those people were, which is why I hate those two books.
Yeah, they're awful. Also, I think that if her goal is as a creative person is to tell her story and what she observed as a white woman, awesome. Do that. Stay with that. Stay with your experience, the things you tell the story from there, and it'll be amazing.
And if your script goes beyond that, by all means, collaborate. You could always find somebody who's willing to pick up the mantle for the part that you can't talk about, you know?
Yeah. There's definitely help out there. And speaking about ones, especially when white writers start speaking about their experience and the things they actually saw, that's actually helpful to all of us.
Absolutely.
That so many people are hiding shameful family things. They're like, oh God, I must be bad too because I come from these people. They can go, wait a minute. These motherfuckers can be fucked up. I can realize it's fucked up. Get the fuck out and fuck those motherfuckers. Hell yeah. Like, so, like she can, through her own discovery of how she was able to get out of it without speaking for anybody else, she actually can be a voice for change, which is very, very powerful and necessary. And again, as Brian said, collaborate.
Yeah, I think that's some wonderful advice. I think as storytellers, one of the worst things you can do is not, regardless of the subject matter, to not do your homework, but then to fall into that pattern of, all I know of Black people is what I've seen on TV. So I'll just use those stereotypes and it'll fit nicely into my little story.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool that she's interested in doing that. And I think that the more white people that are honest and do that and unpack that.
Very powerful.
That's very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there was Mark Twain had an essay called "The United States of Lyncherdom." It was the 1890s or early 1900s when he wrote it, and he was talking about the same thing that MLK talks about in the letter. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to historian hell. Letter from Birmingham jail,
All right.
where he talks about white
Birmingham.
moderates and brain. Where he talks about the same thing, and Twain gets into this whole aspect of the violence that's coming from white people towards Black people in the South is because there's so many bystanders. There's so many people who don't agree but are afraid to let people know that they don't agree. So we're missing a lot of those stories and a lot of those viewpoints of people or white people in the South that did not go along or did not like what was taking place and getting their perspectives. And I know I just crapped on To Kill a Mockingbird, but the only character I liked in To Kill a Mockingbird was around with a brown paper bag, and the townspeople assumed he was a drunk because he always walked around with a brown paper bag or bottle, and it turns out it was Coca-Cola, and he was doing that because he knew that the white people were going to talk badly about him because he enjoyed being around Black people. So they said, oh, well, he's a drunk, he's an outcast, that's why he hangs out on that side of town. And when he gets found out, it's like, no, I just have Coke in this bottle, and I like being on that side of town because I don't have to deal with any bullshit.
Yeah. If you tell the story and do it right, you will be invited to the cookout.
Yeah. Oof.
Real quick, just on MLK, just because you mentioned his name and it triggered a thing in me. I've seen so many people just talking about the protests and how you gotta be peaceful and invoking the name of Martin Luther King, the man that they killed, and only invoking his name in an effort to tell Black people how to behave. And that shit needs to stop.
Oh my God.
And Comika, you posted
You
it.
don't
I
get
saw
to
it
tell-
first from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so angering to me because, you know, being a white guy, I heard all sorts of stuff about Martin Luther King back in the 80s and the 90s that, you know, don't listen to him being a peaceful guy. They had FBI files on him. He was a radical, you know, back then. Oh man, he's radical. Now he's like the magic. Oh no, he's Mr. Peace Machine. It's astonishing to see how history changes for advantage. And so
Absolutely. It's because of the Stokely Carmichaels and the Malcolm X's.
Hated him. He was the most hated man in America when they murdered.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
I had an interesting experience in college, you know, growing up in and having history class all through, you know, my formative years, all through high school and everything. When I got to college, for the first time ever, I had American history taught by a foreigner. I had American history taught by an Indian woman who was educated at Oxford. And so she's British educated from India, and she was teaching American English. And I think I learned more in those 2 semesters about the actual history of my country than I had ever heard. I mean, I sat through most of those lessons with my jaw on my desk because I've never heard this before. I've never heard this perspective before, you know, because we get told all of these things in our education system. And if we don't hold on to anything else, we hold on to those first little formative lessons that we had back that told us that Columbus discovered America and, you know, all of these things like this. And we hold on to it as if that's some sort of truth. And then you get into an actual education system where they are intent on telling you things that are not only going to shock you, but they're actually going to, you know, snap you out of some things. And I can't recommend enough having that kind of experience. And I will love her for the rest of my life. Dr. Gunjas and Gupta, absolutely loved her for that. I intentionally took more classes with her because I needed that perspective.
Imagine if that had come at at a much younger age.
I was actually, I don't even remember where I got this concept because my mom isn't very intellectual. She never, like, she worked all the time, so I wouldn't have gotten it from her. But I grew up believing that the Black Panthers were the Black equivalent of the Klan. And it wasn't until I was 26 years old, 28. It wasn't until I was 28 that I realized that they weren't, but I was still kind of, I don't know. And then it wasn't until I was 33 that I watched Crips and Bloods, Made in America, and I realized everything. And I was like, oh, this is fucked. And I realized that we're all being programmed, we're all being brainwashed, and it's to benefit this system that was not ever even created for us. Like, I mean, it wasn't made for us. This country wasn't made for us. None of these laws, and none of that shit applied to us, right? And it's funny to think that we all are just, it's ingrained. And I think that's what's a lot of what's going on is like shock. Like, not just because of the things we're seeing, but the things that a lot of people are realizing, like, oh my God, this really, like, it's like the curtain's been pulled, you know? And there's people who are massively in denial. They're like, no, and they're continuing with the same narrative. And then there's some people who are like, I don't know what to think, I don't know what to believe. And then there's those of us who have like kind of always known, but then it's finally being revealed, and we're seeing everybody else still being jackasses about it and trying to say it's not happening. And so it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
I actually questioned if I was in reality. Like on Monday, I'm like, this can't be real. This can't be real. What's going on?
2020 is it? It's Jumanji.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, that's kind of a perfect way to do it. You know, my 14-year-old showed me this, I don't know, one of those memes that was going around, and it was like, you know, oh, January, Australia's on fire, February, you know, it's like listing everything month by month. And I mean, it really does feel like this just horrific, like, video game that we're trapped in. And, you know, God help us that we can survive this and come out and,
you know,
I was back in the tiger's face.
I was really trying to hang on until they said murder hornets, and then I
Yeah.
was just like, okay.
I'm disappointed because they haven't shown up.
You know,
Well,
you know, murder hornets.
You're the
Never
chainsaw
heard
baby.
of it.
You're the chainsaws. That's what
It's really interesting to me. You know, I think in some ways that maybe why, you know, because this protest, not only is it like finally we see evidence that most people can't deny, but everybody's so beaten and so fucking
Right.
pissed. And there's so much that has happened. It's like, you know, the whole 10 Commandments kind of thing happening to this country until we finally, you know, I on my show, I called it a Greco-Roman wrestler. We started out with this pandemic, and it's like this Roman wrestler just jumps on you, and you're like, okay, I give up. No, and you argue and complain. And he's like, I'm not moving till I'm done. And it's like everybody's got sent to their room. Everybody's talking about sent to their room like it's, oh, well, that's going to end pretty soon. And as if we get a choice to when we're done being punished, you know. And so I think it's this thing is it's gone on long enough, and there's been enough madness and, you know, frustration and exhaustion. You know, when I do like some of my weird stuff up in the hills, and I've gone to like drum circles and stuff like that with all these manly men. And one of the things that they talk about is you have to get past your ego. And you do that by chopping wood, carrying water. When you're finally exhausted enough, you'll finally listen. You'll finally settle down and start to meditate, you know, break a sweat. And I think maybe that's what's happening. This thing, everything that's happening in 2020 is getting past our bullshit. You know, it's outlasting the arguments. And I think at this point, the people are just so fed up that it's finally like, fine, every state is going to have a protest and a riot. That's it. We're not just going to have the major cities. They're going to be in small towns and stuff. And it's like, that is something interesting. You know, that's
I live in a town of 8,000 people, and there was a protest here yesterday. I didn't find out about it until it was over, but I live in a town of 8,000 people, and people got together and marched through my little town. So yeah, it's everywhere. It is absolutely
New Zealand
everywhere.
Why do you think it is? Because we've seen videos we've seen so many videos nowadays where it's just unequivocal murder.
You know,
Why this one?
I think that we are with this one. It seems like we're seeing so much more. For me now, and this is my experience, you're seeing so much more about what's coming from the police. We are seeing so much more about police going and trashing medics and shooting medics down with rubber bullets who are they're not even protesting. They're just trying to take care of the people who have fallen down. We're seeing so much of that. And, you know,
tear gases on church lawns.
Tear gassing church lawns.
Yeah.
Tear gassing people who are just like standing outside together. And we're seeing so much of this, and for me it's been, you know, just overwhelming. And I can only imagine, you know, I have a friend in Australia who messaged me the other day just to make sure that I was okay. And I said, yeah, you know, I live in a pretty small area. I'm okay. But she said that what's going on here in the States has started a whole movement in Australia for the treatment of the Indigenous people in Australia.
Yeah.
That now people are standing up and talking about what's going on with police treatment of Indigenous people in Australia. This has set the whole world on fire. And I can't put my finger on exactly what it is, but for me, I know it's seeing exactly what these mobilized police units are doing in mass across, you know,
it's
to people who are just marching, to
It's a
people who are
zeitgeist.
just, you know, talking. It has set everything on fire. It's incredible and terrifying. And I don't know, it's a whole emotional, you know, roller coaster. And like we started talking, you know, in the beginning about the bodies popping up and everything from Poltergeist, it goes back to that, you know, what's the next body? What's the next thing? I was reading earlier today and trying to keep up with a black trans man that was killed in Tallahassee just a few days ago and killed by a police officer who just shot him because he might have been someone who may have stabbed someone, you know, that kind of thing. And we're just seeing so much of it still happening in the midst of the protests. So I think that's a big part of it for me.
Yeah, I think it's.
Sorry, I went on for a bit.
Oh no, that's great. That's great. It's you know, it's like trying to figure out why cultural zeitgeist happens, right? Why this time? Why did this movie happen to be the big thing? Why did this political movement finally happen at a certain time? Why did certain things in the 60s and 70s happen? And I don't know if there's an actual strong reason for it, but part of
there is
shaking.
There is.
Yeah, I think
there is that when we had Andrew Bland and Castile and all of the other murders that we've watched, we weren't actively under the thumb of a fascist regime that was recognized by the rest of the planet as a fascist regime.
Yeah.
The country I grew up in, that you grew up in, while it had issues, did not have a clear, let me say it again, fascist regime. The rest of the world is going, fuck, look what happened to America. Oh shit, they're standing up. Everybody, let's go.
Yeah.
We are literally dealing with a fascism that is this administration is terrifying. It has never been this clear. It has never been this clear to the world that there's a people, and we're getting back.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I was thinking of going with this when the question was asked, why this one? We've seen so many other murders and stuff. And I said, I think the death of comfort. I think there's a certain amount of comfort that has happened before. The comfort's not there anymore. People are frustrated and desperate in many different ways. Economically, they're frightened. They're frightened socially, all of this stuff. And then you have this on top, and it's no longer something that could be casually tisk-tisked. It became this thing where certain groups of people were already up to here with whatever. And then this happened. It's like, I'm breaking something right here, right now. And I think that that caught on because I think there is this whole deal of a convenience. I said that we were going to die by convenience, and little did I know that we were going to get woken up by convenience kind of going away. You know, having things, the comfort zone, the nest egg, the little buffer between you and the dangers of the world aren't there for people who haven't had that in a while. And then the people who have had that all the time, it's now raised way over. And I think that might be why finally it should have happened before, right? But it's like the zeitgeist. It happens when it happens. And I'm hoping that this is huge. I mean, part of me is just terrified of what the next couple of months might bring as things are just
gonna get rough.
Yeah. Blood, you know.
I think,
you know, and we've got a rumbling over in Yellowstone, so the volcano may go off. So we may get to skip out on.
It's not funny anymore.
Yeah,
it's funny right now.
That's not funny anymore.
There's also an asteroid apparently that's.
Oh.
I was talking about
those. Fire all around. Hornets. I feel like we skipped over the murder hornets.
We did. We did.
Yeah, we did skip the murder.
That's season 2. That's season 2 of 2020. That's
or as I also heard them lovingly called Baskin bees.
Yes, I've heard that one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing about something where they found like ancient crypts or something underneath
Yeah.
the ocean, and people are
Wrong year to do that.
Put it
like,
back.
wrong year.
Yeah.
Just put that back.
Those are the bodies.
The bodies into the house. Oh.
Not the year, guys. Read the room.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think
I will say,
back
though,
to.
that I think
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was gonna say that I will say that I find hope in the fact that this one video was so unifying. I saw a video of Judge Janine Pirro condemning the officers. I
Wow.
never thought I'd see that.
Okay.
Wow.
Like
That's bizarre.
it was so
Wow.
unifying, and I was trying to understand why, but I think it's the look in Officer Chauvin's eyes when he's got his knees on there and everyone is around him just begging him to just stop, just take your knee off. The man's detained. Stop it, please stop. And he has his hand in his pocket and is just so cavalier and casual about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he has this look in his eyes that like he's enjoying it.
Oh yeah, it's like a hunter who just killed a big, a trophy wild
animal for him. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the casualness of it reminds me of that famous video from Vietnam with the shooting of the NVA. It just has this whole, and that's the kind of thing that shocks people when they see the thing that is, we think evil's like this cackling, guy with a spindly mustache and stuff, but the reality is it's banal.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you get to see the banality of someone dying right there, and it's unbelievable. I mean, Pat Robertson is even coming out saying,
I was gonna say, yeah.
like,
I was like, that's another sign
terrifying.
of the apocalypse, because if I'm agreeing with Pat Robertson about anything, then it's over. I have yelled at that man through my television for years, and now all of a sudden we agree on something. I don't think I can handle that.
yeah,
I was blown away by George W's
Yeah.
statement, because I'm like, your dad you facilitated, like, it was like the weirdest thing. It's I don't know. It's like you contributed to this system,
Right.
and you're calling, what is this?
yeah. I have a hard time. Ask the Iraqis what a nice guy he is, right? And so I have a hard time taking the Monday morning quarterback finger waggling of this guy who basically dirt biked and almost choked on a fucking pretzel, but he dirt biked through the terrors that were happening in his presidency. So I'm not nearly as kind-hearted to this guy, because I fought. Oh, this is the guy that put protesters in cages. Yeah, you can protest. He basically denatured protest for the entire time of his regime, where you can protest. We're not going to get in the way of your right to protest, but you can only protest here. Yeah, in a cage, miles away from what you're protesting.
Yeah.
And
I just think it's funny that I think he's getting towards the end of his life. He's smelling the brimstone, and he does not want
Probably.
Maybe I can fix it.
yeah,
I don't know. There's still a part of me that's waiting for Robertson to turn around and say it's the gays' fault, because that's his favorite.
It's coming.
thing.
That
Yeah.
train
I'm
isn't
waiting
late.
on that.
yeah.
I'm really waiting on that. It's my fault that all of this is happening. Because I have caused volcano eruptions. And
9/11. Don't forget 9/11.
Well, we caused COVID, like we caused all kinds of plagues.
Yeah, we cause, every time you turn around,
it's the gays.
Us queer people have just, wrecked shit. If I had the power they thought I had, Lord,
Yeah.
the world would be a different place.
Robert.
Yeah.
a deity or redeemer they could go to and be like, please help us. These gays are making all the kids. Someone save us as like a redeemer figure that could help them in this.
Yeah, and now they're really confused because it's like being pansexual. How much do you blame me? Is there like a conversion chart?
Oh, it's a scale. Yeah, it's totally a scale. I mean,
So you get
like
like
everything
a percentage
else.
of the blame, but
Yeah. I'm
What's
Coke
my
Light. I'm Coke Zero.
I want to know. what part I had in the murder hornets with my bisexual. It made that happen. I want to see that nature documentary. I tell you.
Yeah, but it's really interesting.
You know what? That is the nature documentary that we need right now.
It's like the sequel to the late great Planet Earth, right?
I
From the 70s.
want a table, a round table with a gay man and a lesbian and a bisexual and a pansexual and all this, just sitting around divvying up how much we're going to take credit for each one of these things.
And Morgan Freeman is narrating.
Exactly.
Yep.
Please.
Yep.
That's a given.
It's like that.
But I want him to trade off with Samuel L. Jackson just every once in a while, because this is going to need the word motherfucker every once in a
When
while.
it gets
It's
angry,
just-
you'll need Sam.
doing recreations of that inner thing. Like, did you ever see Late Great Planet Earth from the 70s, where they like take Nostradamus and the Bible and they say, oh, it's all going to end in the sand, and they do these recreations of guys with missiles that are Arabs that are shooting down at the planet and everything, and I can just see this whole thing of this round table that you want, Waylon, being like that Simpsons episode where they're showing the Masons and they're all like da, 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 doing this
Yeah.
I can just
we're going to have better choreography and music. I'm just going to put that out there right now.
That song is a good song.
Oh,
Facts.
A good song. We do. Like the electric car. Who makes
Yes.
me the best star? We do. Okay.
I can't believe you
so
remember
awesome.
that. Oh, that's awesome.
I knew it word for word, but I've been having these issues with trying to put words together and thoughts, and I've been jokingly calling it COVID brain, but I've decided I should stop, because that's probably going to end up being a thing, and I don't want that to be a thing for me. So, but yeah, I was just not struggling. I'm like, I know all these words. Why are they not coming out? Come on, where are they?
Well, one of the symptoms of COVID-19 is forgetfulness.
Shut up.
If that's
I've
the
had
case, I've
COVID.
had it for years.
I was just going to say, since 1992, I think, was back when my COVID started. But it's interesting, we're talking about these weird, strange bedfellows like Robertson and Bush and stuff. And I think it's a really interesting deal right now. We have a president who now has the White House cordoned off. Areas that used to be public are no longer public. They fence it in. He's got prison guards now surrounding it.
He hides in his basement.
Yeah,
He's preparing for November. I don't like it.
Yeah, I know. All of this stuff is
Right.
just crazy. But his actions seem to be giving us strange bedfellows. I think his spraying of having these guys go and gas a bunch of churchgoers so that he can have this open playing field to hold the Bible the wrong way has actually taken some people who are like going, well, perhaps I can kind of still see, because I kind of like some of the things that he says, and I want taxes. And oh shit, he just fucked up on a church. I'm done. I'm over. It's over. The one thing I thought he'd never do, and so it's really interesting. You get this feeling of like the center can't hold, entropy, United States of entropy. That this is just somewhere along the line, still holding on to this line is unspooling. It's like holding on to that string of the sweater, and the sweater's starting to fall apart. And I see this happening, and I don't know where it's going to go. But as Tiffany said, it doesn't give me a good feeling. It's not like I'm going, hooray, here it comes. I think it's a dangerous time right now, and it's going to get more dangerous.
I remember being fearful in 2016. Like I actually went out and I bought a gun. And I completely prepared for the idea of civil war happening again, or any kind of revolt, because he would not. I had the hope that he would get impeached. I was like, oh, he's got to get impeached. He's got to get impeached.
It seemed
But
like
either way-
a given.
Yeah.
Well, he did, but getting rid of somebody.
Getting removed.
Getting him, completely removed. Right, that's what I meant. And it's like I had so many people around me back then. None of them are here now, but so many back then that were like, "Oh, you're over exaggerating. Oh, it's not that bad. He should, he's not. What's the worst he could do?"
And now we all know.
Hold my beer. Right?
Here it is.
Well,
What's the worst you can
and-
do? Changes every day.
And my husband he calls him Zaphod Beetleborg. I mean, he's President Zaphod around here because he's just like Waylon. He's just out there waving his hands and saying stupid shit, and then everybody else is doing what they want to behind him. He's Zaphod. And I was like, okay, well, I never thought I'd see President Zaphod in my life, but I think we're there, you know? I mean...
I like to refer to him as Lord Dampnut. I saw it in a meme once because this man is name on his name, and I call him Lord Dampnut. But yeah.
I don't know.
None
of us know, and I think that's part of the problem. I think we're just to the point where it's just I don't know right now.
Yeah.
I never know from 1 hour to the next.
I will say though that one thing I've recognized and that actually gave me comfort through the last week and a half was because that whole fear of World War, or not World War, well, yeah, we did of Civil War was the fact that I started seeing officers that were, if not removing their uniforms and quitting, there were some of them that were standing in protest. I saw that there were enough people that are upset and against what's happening that I no longer have a complete and total fear that they're going to sweep the streets and take us all in. Like, I mean, I still kind of have that, but I feel like there's more people than I initially thought that would be involved in trying to stop that from happening.
There are, you know, I was in the Air Force, so I was a military guy. My father was in the military. He was an SP, and he ended up being a police officer, and he stopped being a police officer once I was born because he was afraid that he might not be around for me at that time. And what I can say is that there's a lot of nasty stuff that happens in the military, and there's a lot of nasty people that are in there, as well as police officers. And you notice I always say police officers because that's how it was brought up. But there's also the moral side to it. There's also these moments that are come to Jesus moments, crossroads. The military actually does have things like if it's a illegal action, you know, you can get into a whole shitload of trouble, but you can swords to plowshares. It can happen. People can drop their weapons. They can say this is just not right. And my father, who's not a liberal by any state of the mind, but he, back when the riots in LA happened, he said, you know, I used to wear blue when I was a police officer. He said, when I was coming up, it was law enforcement. That was the harshest thing that we called it. But it was the police department, and it was peace officer. He goes, and then somewhere in the time, it started to be called force in the 60s and 70s. It went from police officer and peace officer to police force. And then it became the force. And then blue went to black. And it was just this head to toe. And he says, it's not the same, you know, he goes, not that there weren't problems. Obviously there were problems, all that stuff. He goes, but the mindset has changed to an aggression. And I think that's what he saw. And this is, you know, he's 80 years old now. And when he was doing it, you know, let's just say he wasn't a great guy in that spot either. But he did see the writing on the wall. He saw the change. And even people who are, say, entrenched in this, military people, stuff like that, they're not all just going to drink the Kool-Aid. No, there are people who are conflicted, highly conflicted on what's going on. And it's a dangerous place to be conflicted. But at the same point, it's a dangerous place for everybody, right?
Yeah, I've been reading and hearing that the police department or whatever did the idea of law enforcement didn't exist until after the abolition of slavery, so to speak.
It started as people rounding up runaway slaves, kind of thing.
Yeah, and
police patrol that gave birth to the police force that we now know.
Because I haven't done the research, and I was wondering about that. I'm like, that makes a whole lot of fucking sense in continuing adding to our broken system if they only existed in the beginning to protect white people and their property. Like, it's,
boom.
I don't know. Can't speak to it. We do have a question, though. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say it's strange because like, yes, we do see we do see some videos of like police saying like, I'm going to escort you guys. I'm going to be part of the march. I'm here with you. I understand your anger. I'm here with you. And I love that. And I love to see more of that. But when you see the military shooting tear gas into waves of peaceful people, like people just with their hands up, and I think the crazy thing is that I think a lot of Black America has known how bad police can get, and we see it a little more than most people do, I think. But now, like, you see them attacking the press, like, you know, shooting cameramen, and it's indiscriminate, and that's scary to me. That's much worse than just like, that's a complete disregard for the human life of everyone in front of you.
That's 70s and 80s El Salvador.
Much worse. Yeah.
I have a friend in Colombia, and he's checked on me a lot while this has all been going on. And he said, you know, in my country, we don't necessarily have racism. It's not something that we have. He said, but human rights violations, that's rampant. It's everywhere. It's every day. Everyone here has had their human rights violated by the police, by the government. So, but he's like, I know this is something new for you, so tell me how you're doing. You know, I know this is something that you've not experienced on this scale before, so tell me how you're doing. And that has been really interesting dialogue that has gone on there.
I have friends that were in the Dallas marches. The first night they went live, and it was a peaceful march. They were going down their little path. They had everything pre-planned. They knew what they were going to be doing, just marching. And Dallas PD had cut them off, separated them. And when I started hearing that this was happening, this exact tactic was happening in other cities, it freaked me out, like other states. But they split them up. They corralled off one group, and they had them waiting there. And my heart was just caught in my chest, because I'm like, please don't let me see anybody die. And they had them waiting there. There was not a single person that threw anything. There wasn't a single person that was being belligerent, and they were peaceful. All of a sudden, the cops start passing each other gas masks. And you can hear my friend on his video saying, oh, they're getting ready to gas us. And so he started telling everybody to be prepared. So they did the first rounds of gas, and then all of a sudden they started throwing canisters at them. Then they started doing the flash percussives at them. They started shooting the rubber pellets right above their heads, like they weren't doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, and they had no reason to do any of that. So that was the first night, and so that continued throughout the rest of the days, with the exception of, I think it was Monday or Tuesday. They had gotten them on a bridge. Oh no, it was Sunday. They had gotten them on the bridge, and you could hear the officer. You could hear it in his voice. He's like, no one wants to hurt you. He goes, I promise you, we do not want to hurt you. This is what we have to do. Just lay down. Just, you know, we're gonna work this out. We understand how you feel, and you can hear it in his voice. This particular person was being sincere, I believe. And so that night they were talking about they were going to arrest all these people. They let everybody go. It's conflicting stories as to whether or not they had citations, but I'm trying to figure out why. Why did you even stop them? Why was there any interference? There's like that's what was terrifying me at first, because I'm like Brian was saying, you see that they have no regard. It's just their, I don't even know. It's almost like someone somewhere told them, do what you want, have fun, because this was before Lord Dampnot got up there and told people, you know, use force. But they had a plan already in place, and it freaked me out. I don't know what the thing was what's going on with any of that. But
well, Tiffany, is that you can't put reason behind hate. I don't know if you ever saw Sophie's Choice, the amazing Meryl Streep scene where the one soldier just decides to pick on her in line and to say you have to choose between your kids, and she chooses her son, he takes her daughter and breaks her. And they're like, well, why did he do that? Because he could. Because he could.
Mm.
Sometimes they just do it because they can. And sometimes they realize they don't have enough of a consensus among them to do a full lynching or attack, so they'll back off. But anytime someone says, well, there are good cops, I'm like, but how many times are they telling on the ones that are murdering and raping and killing us? Because if they're not charges, then how good are you? You're being complacent. You're not participating in the murder or the gang rape or whatever, but you're sitting there and this is your job. Holy shit.
Keep
Can you
hearing
imagine
the
job?
yeah.
That must be terrifying.
You keep hearing that the bad apple analogy, and it's like if I were an apple next to a bad apple, I would want to get that apple out of the crate because I'm gonna go bad.
Right.
You know,
Right?
like get it out of there. Like, so I don't understand how you can just stand next to somebody who's just blatantly wrong and you don't stop them. Especially like as a civilian, it would be hard for me not to stop them. As a police officer whose job it is to enforce the law and protect the social contract that we all have here, how are you not stopping it?
Yeah. That's one of the huge frustrations to me, is that there's no self-policing in multiple areas of the world and in multiple world parts of the government and these institutions. There's no self-policing. When I was, there was a time where it was like, if you had the one bad apple, you wanted everybody to believe that you were trustworthy. You basically like executed that person, whatever fashion it would be. That was not literally kill them, but you would make sure that they were,
get them out.
Yeah.
We all know he's bad. Bye.
Yeah. And that's how you maintain integrity. And there's what's missing, is that there's this, and there's just unspoken things of, that's the last piece that's going to keep the world from crumbling. They're the last hope. They're the last, and that's kind of, it's almost like a mafia mindset. Awfully nice neighborhood you got here. It'd be terrible if somebody broke it.
It's like, it's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a downer.
Well,
I mean, but it
I
is.
can go to an awkward segue again.
Sure.
I am living for the awkward segue.
And
the pregnant pause.
If I mastered anything, it's being awkward. So I'm going to try to summarize the beginning and get to it, because this is a long explanation into a question, and this is more film related. Kelly Krause, she's founded a genre production company and film lab called Disaster Capital, and they're looking to discover and support diverse voices in the genre space. I think what they're running into is issues with how to get that kind of call out. I don't want to paraphrase because I'll mess up her words and that would be wrong because she typed it nicely. Their first major action was putting out a call for genre feature scripts for development in our lab. And while we have more calls for material in the future, we've been disappointed by the number of straight white men who have applied versus the number of women, people of color, LGBTQIA, and disabled writers. We know there is no shortage of talent in the latter groups. And while my partner and I have discussed some of the things that we can do, I'd love to hear any thoughts and suggestions from the panel. How can we encourage and grow the submissions from the groups and voices we seek to amplify?
Really easily. Just to be honest, I've never heard of them, but essentially, if you just look out for any, like a magazine I'm affiliated with, Dope Sista, like any type of publication, Black writers like Tiffany and I, just get the word out to us. You can even contact Afropunk. It's really super easy. I know that you've been Vanessa, know several Black screenwriters. Like, this is a very easy thing. Chances are we just didn't know about it. Hey,
Right.
He got some scripts. Chris Courtney Martin.
Scripts for days.
Got some scripts.
Yeah, and Chris is amazing too.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I've run into that also with when I started Horror Pride Month and started sending out messages. I would like to, you know, interview people and bring people in for this. That first year, I had so many white gay men who contacted me, and I was like, "This is great. I mean, you're part of the group, and I love that, and I love that I get to like work with you and amplify your work as well. But there are more people out there. I know there have to be more people out there, you know. And what I realized going more into the second year is that there is a certain amount of they just don't know. They don't know you. They don't know if they can trust you. People don't know if they can reach out and people don't know how you're going to handle their stories. And so, you know, I had to work to earn people's trust for them to come to me and say, yes, I want to be a part of this. Yes, I want to work with you on this. You have to prove yourself. You have to prove yourself an ally to groups that are not necessarily your own, and it's work, but you have to continue to do the work, and you have to continue to show that you have integrity while you're doing the work. That is one of the biggest things that I've learned the last couple of years, is to just be open and be honest, and when you tell someone's story, tell their story the way they told it. Don't try to put your own voice on it. One of the things that I've been told
for the brown person. Yeah.
Right. One of the things that I have been told by multiple people is that when I write up interviews, it sounds like they're still telling their story. It doesn't sound like a reporter is funneling their story through a program and putting it down. They still feel like I'm telling their story. And that is something that's earned, and it's learned, and it's something that you have to continue to work on. You know, right now I'm doing my best for the Black community in this country to be the ally that I have asked them to be for me, you know, and that's all I can do right now. But so speaking to that also, yeah, you know, sometimes you have to earn people's trust in order for them to see that you really mean what you're saying when you say you want to tell diverse stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a big part of it is that so many writers of color have had their material and stories stolen, and their intellectual property stolen and then retold by a white person like Green Book. We don't want that. However, if this person wants to get in touch with myself, with Tiffany, I'll put the word out on Dope Sister. I'll post it in Afrocentric Films Collective and a bunch of other groups. You will have so many submissions. So part of it's doing what Waylon's saying. Prove that you're not there to steal. Prove that you're not harvesting.
Right.
And reach out to the different groups, there's a Black web series group, there's a Black screenwriters group. Posting here, you will get so much more interest, but they will want to see that you are not there to steal.
Right.
That's all. I mean, and as long as you're not, it'll be a great relationship.
Yeah. And there's another side to this, which I'm thinking about what was it, last year, Jason Blum was asked, you know, why doesn't he have all these women? He's like, well, strangely enough, there's just not that many women. It's like the cheese shop thing in Monty Python. You know, we don't have that. There's not much call for cheddar. Not much call for cheddar. It's the single most popular cheese in the world. And it's kind of this thing where you have a blindness, but also, you know, sometimes this weird agenda. And I think about this because there are a lot of film festivals and there are a lot of conventions, and perhaps they're not being great allies. And I'm trying to figure out how we work on that, or who can we support and who should we not support, that kind of thing, I guess. But yeah, Blum just blew me away with that, because being someone who's been involved with Women in Horror and the Theory of Film Festival from the beginnings of their days, and I'm like, my God, they're the women are the ones that call me back. You know, Joe Bob Briggs never called me back until he needed me. And that, but the women filmmakers did. So it's not like you can't find them, you know. And so I'm thinking about that for everyone that's involved here, LGBTQ, color. You know, what is it like right now to deal with film festivals and conventions and things like that?
That's a lot of predatory stuff. I think that we would all appreciate more people interested in our IP that wanted it from us and didn't just want to harvest it from us. But I see us writing more than ever. I have a ton of projects I'd love to pitch. I have a ton of features I'd love. Let's just that, as even winning awards and getting this and people wanting X, Y, and Z from me, it feels very much like they want to come on board after I find funding for it, and they can go, oh, and then I can stand next to you while you do all the work. And I don't want to do that. I don't see how that helps me. I see how that helps them. So I think that's what we want less of. So Vanessa, if that person really does want other voices, have her get in touch with Tiffany, with me, with Don, like we are right here. And
well, Brian, you said you write too, right? Because I know you act. You said you also write.
Mm-hmm. I am in the middle of writing.
Oh, Comika fell.
I'm back.
Okay.
But somebody catch Comika. She fell. Or Comika fell.
Yeah, I've written a bunch of some short films here and there. I'm writing what initially was going to be a feature or a series, but is now turning into a novel. And have so many ideas for features that I will write when I have time to write those also. But there's,
I mean, I think about, like, for me, when we started Women in Horror, you're jumping into a pool of established events. And so for us, it was difficult to whether or not we were even going to get a submission, let alone who we were going to be getting them from. So I think anytime you're starting something new, there's always going to be that you do kind of need to prove yourself as the event to say, look, we're trying to do the right thing. This is what we're about. This is what we're showcasing. And it is up to, you do have to put the word out, obviously, but it's also up to the filmmaker and the writer to kind of do their homework to see, like, is this a fit for the work that I do? We're very niche, obviously. So, if you are a rom-com writer, you probably don't want to submit to Women in Horror. Unless, there's a lot of horrible monsters and stuff in it, and then maybe we'll take a look. But, there needs to be work on both sides, but the easy part of it is that it's not hard. I mean, it's easy to put it out there. It's easy to do the simple research to say, here are some groups that I can look at. I'm going to talk about my event. And, and as you get going, you have the people that can kind of vouch for you and be like, look, I've been a part of this, or I've been there, I've seen it. Send your work here. It's good.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with me with Horror Pride Month second year. Like, the word got out after that first year, and I sent out messages the second year, and holy crap, I was like, I am never going to be able to talk to all of these people. What am I doing? What have I done? I mean,
it's a good problem to have, though.
I mean, it is an excellent problem to have, but you're still like, oh my God, like, now I went from having 10 people who wanted to do an interview, and now I have 45 people who want to do an interview, and there are only 30 days in June. And I can write a lot, but I can't write that much. So,
Oh, I've got a long question.
Uh-oh.
I mean, let me peruse it first.
Okay. Oh, you're like, let me make sure there's not any little things at the end there.
You never know. I don't know.
Oh, no, you're right.
There's
been so many times I've looked at a comment and it's like the first half of it is like okay or good or whatever. Quit falling to my feet. You're messing with my head. But it's like then I get to the bottom of the comment and I'm like, oh, that took an ugly turn.
Right.
And then I have to like try and figure out how I'm going to process it.
Right.
Yep. Left-handed compliments, right? Those few left-handed compliments, and you're right back in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lola Casanova.
Okay.
I'll read.
Wow.
I'll read. Are you looking at it? It's a long one.
Yeah, it is. I'm just like, my eyes are hurting.
I know. I can read faster, or I can talk faster than I'm just going to read it. I would like to talk about the lack of people of color writers not responding. I know that many don't hear of writing opportunities via social media, and many believe it is who you know when it comes to filmmaking and screenwriting. As someone who does write, I think writers are writers first when it comes to filmmaking. So even if it's white men applying, it could be that they know how to write, proactive about their writing, and it's up to those who want writers must guide them. Maybe typing fast. Am I sounding crazy? It's two sides of the same coin. You want writers and people of color. For people of color, we also have to prove our skills.
People of color?
What?
You want writers and people of color. Like sometimes they're in the same group. So go on.
It's a Venn diagram.
Yes. For people of color, we also have to prove our skills. We know how to write, but people assume we will bring our perspective on others' stories. Whereas white male and female counterparts continually have the leg up based on network opportunities through those connections, etc. In general, more writing courses should be offered to people of color. I also want to add documentary filmmaking versus horror will bring out different writers regardless of color. It's all about teaching writing and helping people of color craft their skills. More of a statement than an actual question.
Yeah.
I don't think I like how that. Emma. Okay, Emma.
Yeah, it kind of has the presumption that writers of color don't have the skills already. And,
That's what it sounded a lot like.
I take a little umbrage with that.
Okay.
Like that just, it has been my experience dealing with very skilled people and amazing writers. I haven't seen that there's any lack of talent in Black artists and other wonderful people of color. I do think that it tends to be more of a networking thing. And frankly, I have never seen anyone hustle like all my friends and artists, like just never freaking stopping.
Mm-hmm.
So
because I was a little bothered by the, maybe they're not as proactive comment. I mean, I'll be honest. I was a lot bothered by the whole thing. I'll be blunt.
Yeah, you may be blunt.
So
that's why we're here.
I'm assuming that how she thought she might have been wording that, she may have been just genuinely trying to offer her opinion and thoughts, but that whole thing is rife with bias, with prejudice, So yeah, I couldn't even comprehend what she was trying to say or ask, because I just keep getting, pow, pow, I don't know. I think I'm going to stop talking for a minute because I don't know.
Oh, Vanessa, I need to tell you guys, I am going to lose power soon, so I will have to sign off before everybody else.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry that you're going to be losing power. I'm more sorry that we'll be losing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. How is everybody feeling as of right now? We're actually over the 2-hour mark. So
wow. Have we
Can
been
you
doing this
believe
that
it?
long?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We told you. It's like a weird
You're all
wormhole.
so fascinating.
A zone.
Yeah, it's easy to get zoned, right? And I like to think that that's just because of the passion. Passion just feeds people. It's like a time machine. Good passion is why I love conventions and after hours time at conventions, because just when the after hour party is over and the bar is telling you to go home, it's like, no, let's find some seats out in the lobby and let's just keep talking. And that's kind of
every good festival ever ends out that way. Sorry.
Well, Comika, before you do leave, Kelly Krause, who asked the initial question about getting the submission, she just wanted to say thank you all. Appreciate your insights, especially about earning trust. It's so true. And thank you for the offer to share through your magazine, Comika. I'll aim for us to reach out to you soon.
And Comika, do you want to talk about some things? You can also copy and paste onto the Facebook page or in here if there's anything that you're promoting, any one that you want to promote, anything that's coming up.
Well, as I said, I'm just loving working with Celia C. Peters, an amazing director, doing the podcast Domesticated, which is incredibly messed up, just horror, sci-fi, insanity. I am finishing up my limited series, The Gray Area. I have the first 2 episodes up on the Facebook page. The last 3 get real messed up. It just goes sideways real quick. So those are kind of the things I'm wrapping up now. Is like the other things that are kind of in post and sort of like edging along, I kind of can't talk about yet. But I just recently signed with the Jackson Agency, and they've just been amazing. And it feels really good to have, just as a writer, people interested in my scripts and web series and stories. And it's definitely been, that part of the journey has really been wonderful.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming in. And I hope we get to talk a little bit more in the near future as well.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm losing power. It was awesome talking to all of you.
You
and
too.
To touch, let's let the insanity continue.
Love you, Comika. Have a good night.
Fare thee well.
Bye, Comika.
Okay, so let's see. And then there were 6. A question from Nathan Andrew Leaflight is, I've done some searching, but I've never found an African-American film festival dedicated specifically to genre films. Do you happen to know if one exists?
I don't think there is. I don't know. I know
I
there's.
don't know for genre films specifically.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are just like the whatever city, Black Film Fest or whatever, but I don't think there is one for genre. Are you going to start one? No. Is somebody going to start one? Who's going to start it?
That'd be great, actually.
Yeah. Someone better jump on that before.
Yes, we've just told the entire world about it. So,
and we kind of have a panel already. Like I had Tanana Reeve Dew and Robin Means Coleman on my show to talk about horror noir when that came out. Nice. And I think they'd be more than excited to be part of something like that, at least in the panel. Now that I'm just telling them, yeah, they're probably watching going, how dare you?
You're volunteering.
What doing to me? I don't want to have anything to do with that. But I know that there are a few people that wanted to be on the show that unfortunately didn't have time for this particular time, and hopefully we'll have this conversation continuing to roll around a little bit more as well.
But I don't think this conversation is stopping anytime soon.
That's what I was just going to say. I'm taking the temperature here.
I do want to get Lola responded explaining everything, so I at least wanted to, since I read her initial statement, and you guys can't see this right now, that I'll read it just to give her that opportunity. She said, I was responding to the above mention on the response that other production company got from mostly white men. I'm not writing against people of color. I was adding, that's how others think of people of color. I know people of color can write, as I am one. But for instance, in college, many of us were left out of the writers' groups on major film projects, time and time again, or editing video, or being stage manager or directing. Everyone selected or leading the projects were never people of color. This is my first time doing this and wanted to join in. I definitely didn't explain my points because I was trying to catch up. Have a great evening.
My apologies.
I get it.
Because as a standalone comment, it's not knowing it's in response to something. As a standalone comment, it sounds like whoever that person is saying maybe it's because people of color. So, but my bad. Thank you, and I apologize.
And I guess I can also apologize. I didn't realize it was in response to that.
Yeah, it's your fault.
I said, blame me. I'll take it. I'm okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, teachable moments. There we go.
I feel like we need the more you know music.
The rainbow.
Yes.
Yeah. Now the Comika's gone, Donald. It's all on you. So what, one of the things that was mentioned before was, talking about the police who are, laying down their weapons and things like that, and the aggressiveness that on the counterpoint of that is the gassing of people, rubber bullets to the press, all of this real aggressive stuff. Dawn, you work with, you discuss history a lot as a professor, correct?
I try.
You try. So I'm trying to make sure that we can put this into some kind of historical context, because one of the things that I hear a lot is, well, it ain't as bad as the 60s were. And of course, I was old enough to, I was around when Kent State happened. So I know the idea of having 4 college students gunned down was a huge deal. But this still feels like this is more the wheels falling off than it was at that point. And it could be time has passed. I was a different age. But, everything scared me at that age. And my parents were like, this is the end of the world. Here we go. But we're here again. So I was wondering historically how you feel about what you've read versus what you're feeling right now.
Well, I have to be careful because some of it, a lot of the stuff is still raw. But historically speaking, I will always argue with the people that'll say, this is, it's not as bad as the 60s or whatever. I have friends in my field who are saying, like, I've got the feeling of Red Summer of 1919, or even the summer of 68, like that uncertainty of that's the biggest issue is the absence of effective leadership, sometimes at the national level, the state level, of being able to handle some of these systemic issues, which again, I saw a video where I think he was in his 90s. He was in a hospice, he was dying, and his granddaughter or great granddaughter, because he was passing, she was recording going on, and he had the news on in the room. He was trying to figure out what was happening, and she had to explain to him, because police brutality is taking place. And he sits there, pauses, and you see in the video this tear just comes streaming down his face. Looks up at the ceiling and says, "I thought in all this time we would have fixed that." And for a guy who had lived through all this, obviously had lived through the 60s, lived through the 70s, had lived through the riots of the 90s, probably saw, the civil rights movement in the 1950s being televised, with the Birmingham bus boycotts, and of course Selma in the 60s. Just having somebody who had lived through that amount of history and amount of social and political strife, realizing shit ain't changed in all my years. And for those of us who've seen the shorter end of this, the riots of the 90s, some of the I guess the lesser known riots or uprisings in the 2000s, right? It's almost as though we become numb to it. So we end up looking at the 60s and saying, oh, well, Chicago was on fire, and it was on fire in 1967, and Baltimore was on fire, Atlanta, LA, all this stuff was going on. And I think the issue is the destruction's not there, but all those problems still are. So, the incarceration rates, joblessness, police brutality, political corruption, or just absence of leadership, like I said, all those same problems are there. And I think that the issue is, for a lot of people, when they say it's not, I hope it's not as bad as the 60s or anything like that, they're looking at the property damage. They're looking at the facts and figures when it comes to how many buildings were burned, how many people got killed. In all, whether it's one person or 1,000, it's still a problem. It's still a problem that hasn't been addressed, and it's there's that Band-Aid that's been put on it, and you're realizing that you've been putting that Band-Aid on a corpse, or at least on a dying patient, when you could have been administering some type of aid the entire time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how we see these cycles. You know, when I was growing up, my grandfather would say, you know, it always comes around again. And
Right.
it used to seem like it would take 20 years. And I'm not necessarily sure if it has to do with technology or what, but it seems like, you know, it used to be like you had maybe 30 years between economic meltdowns, and now it's like every 8. And it feels like all of these things are just accelerating. You know, so there were several riots that almost feel like a numbing thing, or protests that happened during the Iraq War and things such as, and other murders that had happened to people. And so I'm interested in whether technology is going to get us to, you know, finally submit and get rid of this Band-Aid, or if it's just going to like help us, just we won't have enough time to course correct. I worry about things like back in, what was it, like 2006 or something like that. I can't remember when it was. There was Associated Press got hacked. They got hacked, and somebody put out a tweet that said that there was a bomb that went off in the White House, and that Obama was critically injured, and they don't know what was happening. Within 2 minutes, Associated Press was able to, you know, quell that. But millions upon millions upon millions of dollars were lost in just the immediacy of bots, all of this stuff, picking up a story that just had the hashtag of White House.
Right.
I'm wondering how close we are to having like technology either free us from the bullshit of the Band-Aid or give us something worse. You know, that's what terrifies me. It takes a lot less time for the damage to happen.
Mhm.
Well, there was, and I can't remember who I can attribute this to, but the statement went, until our humanity catches up with our technology, we won't advance as a society. And we can have all these great little gadgets, the smartphones, tablet, you know, just whatever the new speed of internet is. But the issue is going to become, if you do see a video of someone getting attacked, whether it's by the police, whether it happens to be these, you know, these dipshits who feel like they're the neighborhood watch, what is going to be your response as somebody who sees it? Are you going to see it and say, hey, this shouldn't have happened, let's push for change? Or is it going to be what happened before the video started rolling? What happened first?
Looking for reasons to justify the murders.
Right.
Yeah.
Or giving an out, just giving an out, like
Right.
the movies where they put the voice of, they take presidents and they give them different dialogue just
Right.
and I'm terrified by that.
Oh, the deep fake. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those
Deep
things are
fakes.
terrifying.
Yeah. Just
It is terrifying. And, you know, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, you know, with what you were talking about, Dawn. It seems like every other day I'm seeing some kind of report. George might have had COVID, and so maybe
Right.
he couldn't breathe as well, and
Right.
and things like
Had
that.
nothing
And
to do with a knee on his neck for 9 minutes.
had
Nothing.
nothing. Right. And I'm seeing this kind of thing online, and I'm like, how many mental gymnastics are you going to do to try to blame anyone except the guy that had the knee on his neck for 9 minutes? You
Right.
know, I mean, I don't understand. I really don't understand those kind of mental gymnastics and the cognitive dissonance that must go with it.
Well, that, and then delving into every aspect of somebody's life to excuse the situation that is completely unreal. Like for some, I brought up to my wife's attention because it came through my Facebook or TikTok or something, and I walked to the room. I was like, apparently George Floyd did a porno. It's just like, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, apparently that's like the new thing now. I was like, I have no idea what this has to do with him being murdered, but
The answer
apparently
is nothing.
That's trending now. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Why does that become part of the story? I mean, that's something like if he were running for office, would be one of those things that you would
Not
expect to show up.
disqualifying
Like,
nowadays.
hey, here's
No.
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 Hey,
Nowadays, it really doesn't disqualify you at all, you know.
well, it definitely wouldn't disqualify him because he was, consensual, the situation. as opposed to
Yeah.
the
I'd
ones
be
that
much
should
more-
disqualify somebody.
Yeah, I'd be much more okay with a president who'd done a porno in his past than saying some of the things
Yeah.
that have been said
And
Yeah.
then,
and
but then
recorded and
even
done.
then, even then, to be real, it's like, I mean, so they did a porno. Was it two consensual adults? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like that's
Right.
that's one of those things that's like heavily stigmatized. It's like it's an adult
Yeah.
film. you know?
Mhm.
And I get the correlation, like people being against internet porn specifically, because there are a lot of trafficked individuals, human trafficked individuals, that get forced into that. I mean, I'm sure there are probably some video productions that might be like that, but generally, the adult film industry as an industry, it's it's just
Harmless. It's consensual adults.
right.
Yeah. Making a paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. Well, this is, I'm glad you mentioned what you did, Tiffany, about the idea of there being a stigma. So there's a documentary right now, somewhat unrelated, but it has to do with the arts, and it's called Boiled Angels. And it's about the one artist in the United States history that lost an obscenity case to the state of Florida. He made this zine called Boiled Angels, and it was a zine. And what ended up happening was that there was a serial killer that was out functioning in society at that point, and someone who was a suspect got stopped with this guy's, and I'm blanking on his name, Mike. Anyway, just a guy who was putting out a zine in the 90s, and this guy gets stopped, and they find this magazine on the front, and it's very controversial and incendiary. The guy wanted to shock a lot about child abuse and things like that in a cartoon fashion. And they immediately said, because there were people being cut up in this, we think he's the murder suspect. He's a murder suspect. So they went to his house because, of course, this guy had bought the magazine. Right in the back is a zine, is his address. And the police go and they say, will you go for a blood test right now? And so they go through the blood test and all of this stuff, and he's ruled out for the serial killer. However, they want his ass bad because they're disgusted by this zine. So from then on, he's always being talked about. They always refer to him being a suspect at one point for a serial killing, even though he was removed from that all the way through the court case. They bring it up every time on the news, in print. And so he goes to jail, but they basically defame him. They know that he's been cleared of everything. And yet they use that because they know that that's going to put a look to this guy, and it does. It ends up taking him down. It's a very disturbing and upsetting documentary. But Mike Angel, I want to say, no, Boiled Angels is the name of the show. But anyway, if you look up Boiled Angels, you can take a look at this. But it falls right into that whole thing where when people of power want to give a narrative, they will do all of this kind of stuff. One of the things that I'm seeing that drives me crazy now is, I guess the protests killed COVID. I guess there's no problem with going outside. It's like, no,
we're gonna have a big spike very soon.
We're going. This is a level of the outrage, and you're going to sit there and say how ignorant and everything it is. Well, do you realize that this is kind of like, if you keep going without putting a tourniquet on, you're going to get your leg amputated? Yes, but I'm running from the tiger that bit and nailed my leg to pieces. So I have a choice here. Both of them suck, but this is the one that I'm going to do. And it just drives me crazy that is being used as a clever little joke. Ooh, it's a little joke, little humor.
Yeah. Well, and there are people running around right now saying, well, in the past 2 days, there's been a huge spike in COVID, diagnoses. And it takes 14 days for those symptoms to show up. And that's not even taking into account how long it takes to get a test once the symptoms have shown up. So what's going on right now has absolutely nothing to do with what's been going on out in the streets the last few days.
Yeah, it's probably everyone hitting the beaches on Memorial Day.
Yep, about 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's
fun stuff.
That's one of the reasons the deep fakes really bother me. Anything that so many people, belief is such an important thing, right?
Oh yeah.
And you can truly believe something completely wrong and think that you're right. And any once again, the Greco-Roman wrestler, maybe hoist Gracie wrestling, be like a python on the guy. But it's like, if you give them one spot to move, they're going to take that move and they're going to believe that. And it's like, I don't even know what can be done now. It needs to end up being something where it's an exhaustion point. It's almost like, okay, I tap out. Now I guess I'll believe you. And I don't know. There was a time growing up in the 70s, seeing Nixon leave office and all of that it seemed like there was going to be some change. It just didn't happen. The tide receded one more time. I'm worried about what the receding is going to be here. I'm hoping that something catches and holds, because I'm thinking about, like, you went through the 60s and the early 70s, and then you get the me generation. Literally, like overnight, it becomes disco and partying and hedonism and rampant drug use and an eschewing of going down the road of social justice warriorship, I guess you could call it. You get what happens with Carter. People elect Carter, and then within 4 years we have the Reagan administration, and it becomes this whole thing of like, finally we're back on track. And so I'm really worried about if this doesn't hook, if there's not some way that we don't lose purchase on where we are, what we might be up against. And November is a really terrifying time for me because of that.
November is terrifying, but even assuming, let's just assume that everything sort of falls into the place. Someone else is elected into office, whatever, I mean, this is, I was talking to my husband the other day, this is years and years worth of work of trying to undo what's been done just in the last 4 years. And then we have still an entire system behind that has to be corrected. And it does seem exhausting, and it seems almost insurmountable sometimes, I mean, just looking at what we are possibly looking at down the road.
I think they're going to do everything they can to throw another Band-Aid on it, because dealing with the real issues is just going to be too hard. And I think you're right. It does feel insurmountable. It's ingrained in the blood of our nation. So it's like, I don't want to say worst case scenario, because there are far worst case scenarios. But I can see a situation where in November, Joe Biden gets elected, and he puts whatever Band-Aid he can, and then it's just business as usual, and no real change happens other than the change of office. I can see that as being a very likely scenario, and I hate that.
Yeah.
I'm mad that we're back in like how it was in 2016. It's like, okay, both candidates suck. both are gonna do a lot of shit that I'm not gonna like. Which one's gonna do the worst damage? Ha.
I think speaking to the level of everyone being exhausted, I think that's why it's so important that, we can all kind of stick together and support each other, and that you get more and more numbers, because there's going to be times when some are tired and the other people are going to have to kind of let them rest, and they take up the fight. And it can't be everyone going at the same speed at the same time, because you'll hit that wall. And we have to be able to lean on each other, and we have to be able to say, I can't fight anymore today. Well, guess what? Fine. I'm going to take the baton. I'm going to fight for you. That is what we need.
Well, and that's the long game. I talk a lot about the racism within the gay community. There are people in the gay community who think because they're gay, they can't be, they're part of a marginalized group, so they can say whatever they want, or they can do whatever.
Liberal racists.
And I spend a lot of time talking about this, and what's happened is they've bought into the lie, and you know, they tell us, well, you're gay, but at least you're not black. You're black, but at least you're not gay. You're black, but you're not a woman. You are a woman, but you're not this, you know, and they keep us all so divided and at each other's throats that we can't come together so that we take up the baton when the person next to us can't run anymore. Because if we all get together on that, then it becomes an actual force to deal with. But as long as they can keep infighting, as long as they can keep us believing that because I'm gay, then I can't be racist, so therefore I can say whatever I want to and offend this black man or this Asian man or whoever, and it's okay because I'm also marginalized, until we start getting rid of some of that part of the system and actually working together, then I mean, there is very little hope.
Yeah, that's a
It's
real
just-
interesting
it's an
thing.
abuse of marginalization, I suppose. I mean, it's a real thing in the Black community. Homophobia is huge in the Black community, and it's disheartening. Like a lot of it comes from like very deep ingrained Christian roots that are like, you know, homophobia is wrong. It's Adam and Eve, not like all the dumb shit.
Same thing with the Latino community.
Yeah, but it's really, it's hard for me to understand it nowadays because it's just being part of a marginalized community, you know what it's like.
Right.
Why would you do it to someone else?
Mm-hmm.
When the fight is all of our fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they manage to make people feel better about themselves by comparing themselves to someone else.
Yeah.
They convince them of it, and trying to rip that idea out of their head.
Yeah, it's like a conditioned way of thinking.
Yeah, I have beat my head against walls trying to talk to white gay men and say, look, you are not excused. You're not excused from the behavior. You're not excused from saying that about this other group. There is no excuse, you know, and it's just it's one of those uphill battles, and it feels like we're all running up separate hills while still trying to get up the big hill that we all could actually be working together on.
Mm-hmm.
This brings up something really interesting too that you're speaking of, Waylon, which I saw it in Armistead Maupin's read, the newest version of Tales from the City. He had a really interesting thing where he had young gay men hanging out with older gay men, and the nomenclature causing rage because one generation did not understand the sacrifice of another, and the other did not respect the new changes to nomenclature, and that it ended up in a real row. And I thought that was really interesting for him to bring up.
Oh,
and
yeah. I mean, it's
yeah. How do we get
we have our own issues with our own history within our community. You know, I mean, I am constantly learning myself. I just today learned about Guillory, which was sort of a separate language for gay men in the early 1900s in England, in the early 20th century. And it was an entire way of speaking in code. It was an argot. And so it was a way of speaking in code. There was it was rhyming. There was a rhythm to it, all of this stuff, you know, and I never had heard of this before. So it's a constant learning thing. But yes, you know, I hear young gay men run around and use the F word for each other. And, you know, they just think it's all fine and great and they've reclaimed a word. And I don't think that they fully understand what that word has been to some of us. And they don't understand why we flinch when they use certain words, when they use certain terms for each other. And yeah, it's all a part of sharing our history, but as well as not knowing all of our history, because so much of our history, like other marginalized communities, was never written down, or it was behind closed doors. But yeah, if you ever want to learn something interesting, go look up Polari, because I was blown away. I had
wanna
no
look it up.
idea.
Yeah, it was weird. There's a dog group, because on Facebook I had to, at one point I was on a lot of different political pages and advocate groups, and then I couldn't handle it emotionally anymore. So then I started doing like, this cat is chunky, this cat is naked. Somebody added me to Dog Posting Society. So in those groups, they are very successful at keeping it no politics, no nothing, just straight up animals. And I respect that, because they have created that space specifically for that. To me, that's a good thing that you can keep it that way. But for whatever reason, this group, Dog Posting Society, well, not for whatever reason, very understandably, they decided that we're going to let BLM posts be a thing. So throughout the whole group, you have all these people posting with their dogs and their little, whatever they want to say for Black Lives Matter. And you get people in that group that are pissed. And so they're complaining about it. So now they're starting to yeet all the racists. And somewhere in there was a guy who had, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden the whole issue of transgender identity came up. And so they all started attacking him. And it was such a weird thing. Whenever I see people saying, well, politics, I'm tired of politics. Why does everything have to be politics? And I'm like, but you're looking at human, these are parts of who we are as people. It's not like taxes. It's not like, we want to change the color of traffic lights. It's like, we're talking about our lives. But like, as far as the queer community goes, there's another group that I'm in, I was in, or page that I followed, called LGBTQ San Antonio. And all of a sudden in the last week, it's weird, because before that you see all these rainbow posts with colors of black and brown added. And that's something that we've kind of started talking about in the last few years, that we need to have that included, because that's how our movement started, was with a Black and a Latina trans woman. These are trans women. There is rampant transphobia in our community. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we wouldn't be where we are at now, technically. I mean, because there's always different avenues of things that can happen. But it was a Black trans woman and a Latina trans woman that got us here. And you're transphobic and you're racist. And somebody said, it's like, I don't understand. Why is this happening? Why is this happening on this page that they're being, well, they weren't being transphobic, they were being racist. But I'm like, that's what happens when you have all these different, marginalizations that are like intersecting all these issues, because that's how they keep us fucked up, is by saying, like Waylon said, well, you might be Black, but at least you're not XYZ. You might be gay, but at least you're not Black. You might be, a lesbian, but at least you're not trans, and they get into that program mindset of, this is what I need to feel better about myself. And I couldn't even, that's why I had a conversation with a lady who was saying some kind of unsavory things on Instagram. We had a nice conversation, and her whole thing was, you can't change racism. And I was like, I'm not expecting to stop racism entirely. Really, I would like for them to not have any power, and for when they say and do the shit that they do, that they are completely brought to justice. That they completely have to face consequences. That is where I'm at. It's like, because Uncle Joe out in the woods or whatever, or no, Uncle Joe, who works, as a CEO of a company, in his suit or whatever, he's going to think what he thinks about Muslims or about Black people or about immigrants. He's going to think that, and there's nothing I can do to change that. There's nothing any of his family can do to change it. He's going to die that way. I just don't want those people to have the power that they have to ruin and end lives. Like that's kind of where I'm at. And I don't know how I got like completely. I feel like I went all over the place. And
well, sorry, these are those kind of topics. But what you were saying about the Stonewall riots and how they started and who started them. There are so many people. There was a movement, and I don't know if you remember this or not, Tiffany, but there have been movements over the last 20 years of trying to drop the T
Yes.
from LGBTQ, and
Yep.
just letting them go their own way and have and I do not understand trying to exclude the group that actually helped us get started on this road to begin with. I don't understand that mentality when we are all stronger if we can get together and work on this thing together.
Yeah. It's,
Like
it's
I've had this mental picture in my head. If it was Pride and in some major city and Marsha or Sylvia was still with us and they walked in there and for whatever reason some young racist or transphobic queer person would treat them like shit, not realizing that they are the reason that they're out partying at Pride. Like, Pride is just so fun. You know, it's like, it's just, let's have a party. And you're not realizing that this person, these people are the ones that gave you that ability.
And this goes back to what we were talking about, is about learning our history and
Right.
sharing our history with each other, and going to the older generation and listening to them and sharing ideas between ourselves. You know, that's,
Well, for
you
the
know,
queer
unless,
community, all we have is
because if
is
we
the-
don't have a history, that's another way of keeping us pushed down.
or teaching the history. I think that's one of the biggest things is that, you know, I think about it a lot. You know, if you are someone who is 20 years old right now, or you're in your teens and you're going to vote for the first time, and you have been disenfranchised, you're someone who your parents have been saying it's been disenfranchised, that all of these things that are programs are unnecessary. You hear all of that. And the only president that you knew was, say, Obama, up until you get to having Trump. What history are you going to believe? Who's going to teach you the history that's there? All you know is that things suck, right? And if you're a teen and you're sitting there saying, oh man, it sucks and I can't stand the people in charge. Who's in charge? Oh, this guy Obama. Well, then obviously everything that my grandfather has told me is true and they're the problem, not this other thing. That is what scares me, is how do you teach people the real history? What's the real history at a certain point when you get to this? And I also fear the idea that we call social issues political now. Because politics, you can take a side to. Politics is just a debate, right? It's just, but that should be like what Tiffany was saying. It's like, oh, we want to change the color of stoplights and things like that. That's some form of politics. Your taxes, that's politics. But when it's life or death for people, it shouldn't be politics, because it's so easy to just turn it off as a yes, no, a binary thought. And I'm tired of binary thought. You know, it's just killing us.
Yeah. And, you know, I tell people all the time, my sexual identity and my sexual orientation was not political until someone else did that. I was
Right.
living my life and
Right.
and doing my best, and it had nothing to do with politics at all until politicians came along and said, we need to regulate this. We need to tell you what bathroom you can use. We need to tell you where you can go and who you can marry and all of these things. I said a long time ago, I have no problem if they wanted to declare marriage a religious thing and they didn't want gay people to get married, fine. But I want them.
Nope, he got lost in
I
time.
want married people to give taxes, all of the things that go along with that they get through the government. Give that up, and then I'll say, okay, this is a religious right. But until you do that, this is a political thing, and it's a political
If it was
move.
only a symbolic gesture, then take it. Like,
Yeah.
but it's so much more than that. So,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's foundation. It's foundational, because they have built the idea of marriage and the family to this point where unless you can have that, then you're not fully a part of the society.
So many weird little things that they've decided to set up and regulate to control people that are not like them.
They spend 98% of their time doing that. I mean, every day. It's something else.
Well, it's like gays in the military, right? So when I was in the military, I was a firefighter. Women were not allowed to be firefighters. And that was like this big, you know, women can't carry ladders. What are you talking about? I mean, crazy conversations like that were what I was hearing. But gay in the military was this whole thing can't allow homosexuals in the military. And I thought, what's the big thing here? Well, you know what? If you can't come and defend, if you can't chop wood, carry water, you're already regulated into the background, right? And that's what I always saw there, is that there's this high idea of, if you're able to actually contribute in the military in that way, then you are an essential part of the system that we have. But if we keep you out because everybody's worried about it, well, then you are truly marginalized, and everyone can say that you're not carrying your weight, all of this stuff, you're in the background. It can just sterilize the whole thing. And even back then, I knew it was horseshit. but it's that's the kind of thing that happens. These sound almost like real rules, right? They sound almost like in some crazy way it makes sense, but they never make sense. It's always this thing of chopping away at one group, marginalizing a group, and it's always like this one group that's always the control, right? If you're in an experiment, there's always the control where everything starts, and it's like it's always the same people who are the control, and everything else has to jump around that.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to go myself.
All right.
So,
well, you know what? You made it 2 hours and 47 minutes.
Yeah, we're almost at the 3-hour mark.
But this has been a lot of fun and really informative, and I've learned a lot, and which I think is great. And we should do this more often. So
Yeah.
But
our doors are open.
But yeah, so I really, thanks for inviting me to be here.
Thank you, Waylon. Anything that you want to talk about? Didn't you just have your 1000th article written?
I did just have my 1000th article at iHorror published. And
that is amazing.
Nice.
I also am self-publishing my first novel this September. It's a high fantasy romance type novel, something that I never thought that I would actually sit down and write. But yeah, lots of elves and magic, and just so we're clear, not all of my elves are white and blonde and blue-eyed. So I have tried to, really tell a story that everybody could find themselves in, while at the same time just creating a story that just really spoke to me. So and that is called Lotus and the Gathering Storm, and that'll be out in September.
I can't wait to read that.
Waylon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on in.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Talk to you guys later.
We'll have you back. You do well.
And then there were 5.
Yeah, and then there were 5. This is like
it's like a horror movie. We're slowly getting picked off here. Who's gonna survive to go into the sequel?
I didn't die first. I'm happy about
I was about to say something like that.
I didn't want to say it, but I was thinking the same. It's like, we're both here.
Both of us are here.
It's a different kind of movie.
I'm safe. Except wear the red, what is it? The Star Trek red jersey or
yeah, the red tunics. Oh God.
Well, this has been truly great. Is there anything, we've talked and we've gone around quite a bit. What are you feeling right now after having this conversation? What do you feel we could still talk about? What do you think has to be said that we just haven't really talked about yet? I haven't looked at the news since we've been on, so I have no idea if there's still a country. I'm assuming there is. But
I don't really have much left to say on the topic. I actually kind of wanted to start talking about movies, but now
good. Let's go.
Can I ask, do you feel like doing this? I mean, do you feel good about doing this? Was this something that
passed the time?
About this particular topic?
About coming on tonight and talking about what's going on and is it helpful to have this conversation?
I feel if there were people that were listening and connecting, then yeah, absolutely. But otherwise, I've literally been having these types of conversations offline with other, with family and stuff like that. So, if it's helping other people, for me, I feel like it's useful. It did good. But I don't know what you guys think or how you feel.
I agree. I mean, I've been having a lot of these conversations, and honestly, originally I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to have it in me to do this one, to be honest. But I found it, and I'm glad I did, and I'm grateful that this conversation happened because it was kind of cathartic. It was a good way to organize thoughts and hear, I guess, kind of have a finger on the pulse of people outside of my little microcosm. Yeah, I found this very beneficial. Thank you.
It was definitely productive, and I'm glad that, for me at least, that you reached out and asked me to do it, because it's a conversation that I've had, like Tiffany was saying, and I'm assuming Brian as well, had our entire lives.
Right.
Anytime some situation would come up, whether we happen to be the only sprinkle of color in a situation, and somebody did ask for our opinion, or we needed to offer an unsolicited viewpoint, or at least background on our own experience with something. I didn't get tired of it in this conversation, because I think that there were points where I had to sit back and listen, because it was like therapy. The other issues and seeing similarities between struggles. So I'm not as worried about November as I normally am, and that's because of what I've seen people do within the past few days. And I'm just hoping that same
Agreed.
energy there, when that same energy is there for people to actually say, it's not just about Trump emic issues. It's about,
Right.
If somebody says some bullshit racial or homophobic or transphobic joke, that you call them on it. And thankfully, they're ending relationships with family, what they've woken up to.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, because, and the reason that I say that is you guys have seen so many Band-Aids, right? So I would assume that this would just be like, yeah, well, let's see what happens. But the idea that you're feeling hopeful because of the type of energy that's happening right now, or maybe the amount of energy that's happening, that gives me hope, because I'm just an eternal pessimist around this stuff. But it's great to hear that you're seeing something, so that we can make Tiffany happy. I'm going to ask my patented question for Donald and Brian and Tiffany. First kiss, the movie that got you in love with horror and made you go down this terrible path of spending all your time watching these things. I'll start with Donald. What was your first kiss with horror?
First can remember would probably be Children of the Corn.
Oh, ooh.
And that's the first I can remember. It may have been one of the Friday the 13th movies, because there were a lot of movies that were on rotation, that were just, before they had I'm not going to drop the dime on these individuals, but before they had the video protection thing for stuff, that was how I saw Renner from Blockbuster, or somebody they recorded on HBO or something, and it's like Cue the Winged Serpent and Chud, and all these movies that you go back and you watch and like, God, why? But I would probably say Children of the Corn freaked me out, or one of the Friday the 13th movies.
That's awesome. How about you, Brian?
So the first horror movie that I remember really enjoying and digging when I was a kid is gonna kind of sound silly, but it was Leprechaun. It was a terrible movie. I watched it. It does not hold up at all. When I was a kid, I loved it. But there's also like the first time that I was actually like legitimately scared by a horror movie, like couldn't sleep for days. Damien,
Wow.
when I was a kid, that movie that affected my psyche.
Have
I
you
love
seen
that movie
Leprechaun
now, but
Back to the Hood?
I
That was
have
funny.
Leprechaun.
That
They
was-
made 4 of those movies that I know of.
Of the Hood ones?
How? Well, no, 4 of the Leprechaun movies. I
Oh,
think
okay.
that was
Yeah.
the first
How?
Leprechaun, Back to the Hood. How?
Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
franchise you're gonna want to explore.
That's
Yeah.
Witchboard. They did the same thing. There are some that just go on forever, and you're just like, how? Like, I mean, one of the worst is Hellraiser. Hellraiser is such the first film is like this really ground changing film. And I
Yeah,
think they're at like 9 or 10 of those, and I don't even
Yeah.
know anymore. And
You
it's
just
like
start
after
turning them out. Like,
yeah.
how?
yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's a nightmare. All right, Tiffany, we've held off the best for last.
Well, it's kind of a two-part because the very, very first one that I ever saw was in the cinema at the cinema. I was 3 years old. My mom took me and a cousin. The cousin was a teenager. I was 3 to go see Aliens, and I am literally to this day I've seen the movie God knows how many times, and I cannot remember the sequence of events. The only things I vaguely remember, I think that's the one where she has the get away from her, you bitch part. But it's like like I said, I've seen the movie like so many goddamn times. It's one of my favorite series because I think they're beautifully shot, So it's like I can't remember. But I do very vividly remember Bishop getting torn in half, and when we left, I remember throwing up. So that's pretty much that. But like the first
A true artist.
Yeah.
Like the first movie that I really remember watching, and I guess I enjoyed because like I was 4, I don't know where my mind was, but it was Nightmare on Elm Street. And I remember being afraid of Freddy and just I don't know, it was weird. It's like I was terrified, but I loved it. And yeah, so that was like my first horror film love, I guess.
That's awesome. See, all hail horror. And I love that some of us had really chaotic experiences and traumatic experiences, and it kept us going, right? And I think it does, in its own way, heal that kind of trauma. It may give it to you as well, but it's wonderful to get to talk to you folks about all of this. I'm so glad that you came on to spend some time with us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Much respect.
Thank you.
Much respect for giving us that time, and really sincere. It was a lot of fun, and I hope we get to do it again. And we're right at 3 hours, so it seems like this is a perfect time. Everybody want to just say a little bit about what they're working on, if you feel like it?
Promote yourself.
Yeah, so there's of course, I was going to do the shameless plug for this earlier when Comika was talking about not giving your intellectual labor for free, and I'm thinking like I wrote a book about it, but 4 years ago, and it was really just it like Brian brought up, it was cathartic where I got tired of answering those questions of like, hey, what does it feel like? And I turned it into something that got thrown into a lot of my lectures, and I realized I was giving all these gems away for free. So I just wrote them all down, published it a few years ago, and then my first thriller, because I think it was just light horror, I self-published a few months ago, called Bastards of the Bayou. And I'm working on, I guess in that universe, story called Magnolia Lane, about a slave plantation that someone decides they're going to use for a wedding venue. Strong opinions about that. So the people who show up to have a wedding, it's not going to go so well for them.
I love the title. I definitely want to check that out.
I think that's a great concept.
Yeah, Bastards of the Bayou. That's awesome. Thank you so much. How about you, Brian?
Well, this COVID has been very disruptive. I had a lot of things that were about to happen, and then nothing. Everything just had to pause. So with that time, I've been doing a lot of stuff just around the house, but also trying to write as much as possible, and finding inspiration in things that are so can be dark, but that's the world we live in. So I recently again kind of promote a podcast I helped a friend with called COVID 39. My friend Mark Millian did this really interesting podcast where it takes place 20 years in the future from now. And the world is very different, and they're discovering how the world got there through these kind of memories that are exploring what's happening right now in the world. So I play a character in the podcast, but yeah, feel free to check it out. It's on Apple Podcasts and like wherever you get your podcast apps. It's called COVID 39.
Awesome.
It's really cool. But yeah, also just, writing, and there's a script that I'm kind of working on that really based off of a lot of stuff that's been happening lately. But someone asked the question, what if all of the terrible things that some people think about Black people were real? And I was like, oh, that'd be an interesting monster. Turning people's own things kind of against them. So like writing, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome. And okay, Tiffany.
I think it's on Monday we're going to start, but I'm going to be script supervisor for Lou Simon in her upcoming feature 73 Minutes, which is really crazy. Like, it's awesome. Like, I'm so excited and in awe because she's basically going to be shooting remotely, 4 different locations, will be coordinating it all together, but like being respectful of what the COVID safety measures are. But it's really neat. There's going to be like a lot of conference calling and I guess Zoom, like getting to make sure we're getting everything done. So I'm really excited about that. I just did a short film for funsies. It was supposed to be for the Corman Challenge, and I made it long, and I planned on cutting it short enough for it, and I didn't have it in me, so I just kept it at its full length. But it's called Angel Food Cake of Doom, and I was inspired by, I literally woke up one morning and my Facebook feed was nothing but banana bread. And I'm like, and so then I started thinking, I'm like, what if there's like some kind of weird thing going on where somebody inspired this because they want to create an army of evil pastries? And so it was done with like obviously nothing. I wanted to make a puppet monster. Like that's what I really would have done if I could have. But it's just like, camera angles. I don't want to ruin anything. Anyway, so yeah, so it got accepted into the, God, I can't brain, Cyber Shorts Virtual Film Festival, which is going to be this Saturday. There's like a whole Microsoft virtual room because it's going to be VR, like with the headsets and stuff for people that have them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But you don't have to have a VR headset to participate. Otherwise, it's just kind of like, I guess, like a Zoom call. So that's premiering Saturday for that. There's like, I'm pretty sure there's the link up in my Facebook pages. I am trying to finish my a horror feature that's based off of the legend of Goatman's Bridge. It's in North Texas urban legend.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not about the Goatman per se. Like it's really, the story is focused on a woman who's one of his descendants, and as she ends up in this rehab facility that's actually on the property where he used to own, she ends up connecting with that, and like all this bad stuff happens. And I'm horrible at paraphrasing, so I don't even know how I'm going to pitch whenever that happens. So this is not easy for me to explain, but it should be good. And then I'm also writing a PSA for I'm writing to submit a PSA for the Dallas Women in Film group. Like they're a membership club. Yeah, running out of steam. I can't. those are the things and stuff, and I
That's
usually
what
post
happens
them
when you talk for 3 hours.
Yeah,
You
this
just
is more than a Marvel film. It's longer than a Marvel movie.
Oh wow, we beat Endgame. Wow.
That's right. Hard to believe.
Gosh, can we put that at the top?
Yeah. Almost as many false ends as Endgame.
Right.
Well, thank you, all of you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody who's been listening to us and watching and commenting. We really do appreciate your time and that you came out for this. We will have some links from our guests for you to be able to partake in some of their wares, some of the work that they've been doing. And until next time, stay hell-bent, everybody.
Thank you.